Okay, all right, we're gonna get started if TV 79 is ready.
There she is. Right there, Erica.
Yes, I'm sorry,
Her bag.
yes, I'm ready. They are, I would pitch you over, this is a horrible seat.
But it's gotta be, Lori, it's gotta be seats no weird.
You just want to So, sorry, we're gonna call, so I get everyone's attention, please. Anybody know how to whistle? I tried. Okay. Calling this regular meeting of the Darien Parks and Recreation Commission to order. It is Wednesday, July 17th. And the first order of business is the approval of the June 19 minutes. I would entertain a motion to move that later in the agenda since we have a fairly large audience this evening. I do have some questions and comments on it. I know Susan, you mentioned you do as well. So if someone is willing to make that motion. Okay, second? Okay, everybody in favor? Okay, so just don't let me forget later, Pam, that we need to do the minutes, okay? Okay, I just think that's better. Okay, then we will move to the public comment section. We have a number of people here, so I'm guessing there will be some individuals who wish to speak. I think, Pam, we should limit everybody to 3 minutes. Okay, and you'll yield time?
I'll handle that. Do you guys want copies that I did? Or is everyone okay with that?
We'll do that next. Okay, so this is public comments. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. I will acknowledge you. I ask you to go to the podium. You need to state your name. Make sure that Jamie, where you are down there, gets the correct spelling, and we need your street address, please. Okay. Whoever would like to go first. Can I see a hand in the back? Yeah. Gentleman in the back.
I'll raise my hand when it's 3 minutes, okay?
Okay. I mean, I'm signed up on that. My name is
Oh,
Vincent
I didn't realize we had a
Carterville.
sign-up sheet. I'm sorry, excuse me. Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's not
My
a way
name
to
is
sign up
Vincent
sheet.
Argabo. I'm at 69 St. Elmo Straits. And I attended last week's meeting, from which I saw the committee's concern is for the beach, to maximize the beach wherever possible. And I asked the committee to consider the obvious, and that is to eliminate the sand dunes proposal, which would take 10 feet from the beach edge from the west and south sides of the parking lot. Yes, there'll be a half a dozen or so overflow events every year. Possibly the town could look into a system of street sweeping to clean up the mess every year, but certainly avoid putting in dunes at the moment. Look into the issue 10 years from now maybe, but as the waters rise, we'll see how we handle it. That's my comment.
Okay, since I did not realize we had circulated a list, we will go backwards and I will call on the first person who signed up, which was Perry Boyle.
I'm not sure, thank you, and thank you for doing this, for your public service, I really do appreciate it. I am not a neighbor, I live on the other side of Goodwatch Bridge, or Riggs End Bridge. I really urge Parks and Rec to spend some time at this beach and understand that it's not actually much more than a paved over piece of sand. And the dunes, 3-foot high dunes, with grass on top, like, if what the architect proposed at the last meeting is done, you will lose the entire west beach at high tide. And the only visual that you will see, no one will see a beach. You will see a parking lot, you'll see sand dunes, and you'll see a 2-story monstrosity building. Like, this is a tiny little park that cannot ecologically support what is being proposed for it. It should be, the bare minimum should be done at this park. It should be a place where people can actually enjoy going to the beach, to picnic at the beach, to be outdoors at the beach. It doesn't need flexible, rentable community space. Nobody in the town survey wanted that. Nobody in the town master plan wanted that. And I think we shouldn't be developing property for the benefit of the few at the expense of the many. That's what I'm saying.
And I'll really ask everybody to. Okay, Janine Hackett, next. Thank you.
Sorry, Janine Hacker, 112 Pear Tree Point Road. And no, I cannot see the beach from my house, because I feel like every time I attend one of these meetings, the neighbors are labeled as people that, you know, we're gonna ruin the view if we do something. So, I live near the beach, I love the beach, I use the beach a lot. I've attended nearly all of the Pear Tree Point Beach committee meetings since last fall. And I'm really disturbed with the direction that the committee has gone to. As the previous person just said, in the town survey, rental space, catering space, all that was the lowest thing that residents wanted. Yes, it has become the priority of this committee. And the thing that people wanted most in this town was the beaches and preserving our beaches. And yet I think up until the very last meeting, all we talked about was the building. We've hired an architect, we've been zooming straight ahead to what can we do. We've gone from 4,000 square feet of rental space, catering kitchens, maybe a restaurant. We've reduced that down, but you know, now we're eliminating the concession stand, which originally what the town wanted was improve the bathrooms, improve the concession stand. We can't make changes to the building that's there. In fact, the latest plan that we presented by the architect is to actually put a skin around the building, because we can't touch the building, because as soon as we touch the building, it has to be raised 17 feet or something like that. So we're like all about building up, and on top of this, for a viewing platform to watch the sunset. It's absurd. We need to go back to what the town survey said, what the people in the town wanted, and the people in the town just want their beach. They wanted the resiliency of the beach protected. They wanted more picnic benches. They wanted more chairs, more umbrellas. Nobody wanted the direction that this committee has gone to. Nobody wanted this, except somebody on the committee that is driving towards this. And I find it so incredible that we've gotten to this point, that we're spending money on architects to design things, and every meeting I go to, it's a completely different plan, because there really is no set direction that they're supposed to be in. And every meeting, it's everyone's startled by like, oh my God, the boardwalk is gonna take up this much beach, or the dune's gonna take up this much beach. Like, we're just going crazy here, and it's really upsetting. And I would really like the focus of this committee to be saving our beach and doing what we need to do just to improve the beach. That's all we need to do. And that has not been the priority. And we have not hired the right people to look into saving the beach. We've hired an architect to make it look pretty. And that is the wrong way to go about doing this. We need to hire the right people. And whether it's dunes or not that I'm in support of dunes, but there are things that can be done. And the right people need to be hired with the money you're using. Thank you. I see your hand up. Thank you.
Okay, next is Sarah Woodbury.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm here for the other thing.
Okay, that's what I thought, but your name was
Oh,
on the
no, I didn't
list,
know
so.
what
Jeffrey Urban.
Thanks. I'm Jeff Urban, 10 Crane. All the information you need. 10 Crane Road. I also don't have a visual of the beach, but some of the comments that I was going to address have already been stated here. But when I looked at the replay of the last meeting, and it's a very noble in concept to put in dunes with obviously timber within the dunes to preserve them, and that would create a plan for long-term I guess preservation. That at least there's a thought around preserving the West Beach in particular. But in reality, for those of us that are down there quite a bit, and I'm sure you are too, I mean, many of the tides, that tide is within 2 feet of the curb. So if you're even talking about 3 feet into the curb, 5 feet into the curb, 15 feet at one point it was talked about, I mean, you're gonna have that tide just slapping against whatever dune you put there on a very frequent basis, if not five times a month, or something like that. So what we'll probably be left with over a period of time, and I'm not even gonna talk about the structure that's been proposed, is basically a lapped against wall, consistently, that if not, maybe it could be cleaned up you know, initially, but over a period of time, it's just gonna end up looking like a flat wall against the parking lot unless that's addressed too. So, I just hope that's taken into heavy consideration. It doesn't seem like a great long-term plan. And again, people have commented on the fact it's essentially a sandbar, which it is. I think that needs to be factored in more heavily than it has been.
Those are all the signups I have. I know there's another sheet, or people can just get up, yes.
Good evening, my name is Wynn Lydecker, I live at 41 Birch Road. 33 years ago, when we were considering where to buy a house, schools mattered, the beaches mattered. We love Darien and we love the beaches, and I've been going to Pear Tree Point Beach with my family for 33 years. When I have told people what the plans are, they've looked at me incredulously and said, but Pear Tree Beach is perfect. Why would you build all these things? Why would you put in concrete sidewalks? Why would you put in a tall 2-story building when it's a beach that's natural? People go there for the views, people go there to get out of their cars easily and enjoy the beach. What has been proposed, I don't want to reiterate everything that's already been said to you, but the plans do not make any sense. If you have large gaps in these sand dunes, the tide's still going to come in. It's going to erode the sand dunes. Levees need to have no gaps in them. If you want a levee to keep the sound back, that's one thing. But this is a beach. Eventually, yes, maybe the beach is going to go away because the seas are rising, but right now, don't destroy what we already have. It's a fabulous asset. And the parks in Darien are wonderful, the beaches are wonderful. What we need is better bathrooms, improve the picnic area, don't take it away and and don't put paving in the picnic area. That's crazy. People go to the beach, have their feet in the sand. Get your boat ramp and make the beach improved. Don't destroy it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I actually have a question for the committee.
Just first of all, I need your name, I need your name, I need
Delete
your address, and we are not addressing questions, you can make a statement.
Okay, I live at 150 Pear Tree Point Road.
What's your name?
Delise Bldg. My husband and I noticed last week that there was what appeared to be a camera that was erected attached to a no parking sign across from our house, right outside of the beach. It was up for several days. It then came down. I can't ask a question, but I'm just gonna say I was curious whether that was something to do with this committee and what the purpose of that camera was. And I guess you can't answer, but that's my question.
We'll make sure that's addressed during our discussions.
Hey, John, I'm Brooks Ruscia. I've lived in Darien for 59 years. Been a fireman in this town for over 40 years. My question on the beach would be, I've been going to Pear Tree Beach for forever. My father was a Commodore at the boat club. My question to the committee is, I understand you want to put these berms, dunes, and my question will be, how much sand in the last 50 years have they ever had to replace because of erosion? Because the dunes are specifically to stop erosion. So, in all the years I've been around, and I think Cheryl can attest to it, I don't think there's been a lot of beach sand that's been replaced in the last 20, 25 years. So my concern is that we don't ruin Pear Tree the way we ruined Weed. Because if you go down there on the weekends, if you live in this town and you go down there, people back their cars up, they open the back of their car, they have their cooler with drinks in it for their children, and they put their blanket out and they enjoy the beach as it's supposed to be. They get a hot dog, they get a hamburger, they get a soda, and they get a popsicle. Because that's what you do when you go to the beach. And I honestly think putting big sidewalks People go to the beach to get sun, so I don't think trees are really the answer either. And eliminating parking spaces, if anybody's ever been down there during holiday weekends when the boat club's hustling and bustling and the beach is hustling and bustling, the tide's right, I think we're ruining a great thing. And I really think that there should be more concern in other areas of the Parks Department than spending a lot of this money at the beach. That's my feelings.
What's your address?
62 Sedgwick Avenue in Darien.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
Jim Errington, 116 Pear Point Road. I went back to the master plan just to see where the events that everyone has just described came from. And I can't see any reference anywhere in the master plan to elevated dining decks or flexible event spaces. It isn't in the town plan. I then went further back in time to the town survey on needs and importance. Darien residents, when questioned, put as their number one priority, the highest important, was beaches. And the town met their needs. In other words, our beaches are fine and the people were happy. At the bottom, labelled low importance, low needs met, rental event facilities, special event places. How, given this data, and given where we started, and this is town data, have we got to where we are now? Talking about putting elevated decking in a severe flood zone, especially when the town has another beach, Weed Beach, which is better positioned to accommodate such a facility if people wish to have such a facility. And bear in mind that we're in an environment that every second house in Darien seems to be for sale because people can't afford the taxes. This is a family town. The beach is a family beach. To keep families in this town, we need to have affordable levels of taxation and facilities geared up to meet the needs of families. And I'm going to suggest that the attempt to replicate what appears to be, or was initially at least, a version of the Naroti Knot Club, but based on Pear Tree Pond Beach, was not asked for the town, is in the wrong place, and I don't think if it went to a vote, the taxpayers would go for it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Clara Sartori, and I live at 161 Old Kings Highway South. I have just a couple of points. One, in watching your videos, I think this group and the building committee need to do a better job of explaining the relationship between the two groups, because I've been involved in town government for quite a while, and I found it confusing, let alone somebody who is new to it. Another thing, I hope you take a conservative approach to restoring the beach at Pear Tree. I would suggest doing something about the bathrooms. That's the number one priority, and the parking lot, the drainage, and also consider eliminating some of the head-in parking that occurs at the back beach and at the front beach as well. It's very dangerous for a person to be backing up with kids running behind the car to go to the snack bar or to go to other places on the beach. So there are just a couple of suggestions, but I certainly hope that you'll take into consideration that I think a more conservative approach to the renovations there would be in order. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? once? Going twice? Okay, we will close this section of public comment. We also want to make sure that the commission members are aware of and have had the opportunity to review correspondence, written correspondence that we've received from residents. We receive it in various forms. Some come just to me, some come to Pam, some come to everybody, some go to Mike and Randy. So Pam, I think you've got copies that are available. I believe they were sent out by email as well. But we're not going to read them or whatever, but we just wanted to go into the record that the commission, all commission members have been provided with copies of all of the correspondence that we've received on any topic during the last, since our last meeting. Our next order of business, we're actually gonna move over and talk about Weed Beach for a little bit. The commission, as it was announced at our last meeting, is working with the Darien Athletic Foundation and the Darien Foundation on a project to further improve the Weed Beach parcel. I'm just gonna take a little license here. I do have to say, I'm disappointed when I hear people say that Weed Beach has been ruined. You know, absent the fact that the person sitting to my left was on that committee and worked very, very hard on it. I personally love Weed Beach. I was there with my family, my granddaughter this weekend. I think the dunes are absolutely beautiful. Sit on the beach, feel like I'm at Cape Cod, looking back at dunes and grass and not looking at car grills. That is my personal opinion. But I do ask people be respectful of the work that was done on that property. So, sorry, just had to get that in there. So where we are on Weed Beach, the master plan was approved last February, including the concepts for Weed Beach. We had a public hearing regarding the enhancement of the short lane parcel in October of 2018. The Sewer Commission has provided us with approval to improve a portion of their land which abuts what was the short lane parcel, so that we can really complete that whole area and make it look nice. We have the approvals that we need from the EPC, and Weston and Sampson has been engaged for the design process, and Dan Biggs is here this evening over there, and he's also working with us on Pear Tree. Next up is Dan will be completing the design process for the entire project, again consistent with the master plan. The concept is to connect the entire Weed Beach Park with walkways and pathways so that people can complete an entire walking loop. Following the receipt of Dan's proposed designs, there will be a public hearing. We may need to go to the EPC for approval to amend the application and possibly to planning and zoning, depending on if there are any potential grade changes. Subject to the approval of the commission this evening, the foundations will be the applicants for this project. Following all approvals, the approved plan will come back to the Parks and Recreation Commission for its final vote. Assuming approval, the acceptance of the gift will go to the Board of Selectmen for their consideration, to ask them to refer it to the RTM, who would actually vote to accept this gift. During that process, we would expect that the foundation will provide regular updates to the commission. So what we need as a commission this evening would be to effectively direct the Athletic Foundation as well as the Darien Foundation, I know it gets a little confusing, to act on the commission's behalf to proceed with this plan so that we can open up the short lane parcel, connect the park. We've owned short lane for 5-6 years now. Pam's staff has done a good job at least clearing it a bit so it's a bit more usable. Part of the project also includes paving what is the dirt parking lot that we had hoped to do in the original plan and were not able to fund. Because I was down there on Sunday and the parking lot was completely full, including the overlook. I had to leave for a few minutes to attend to something. When I got back, I almost couldn't find it. So the beach is being used very actively. I've drafted up wording on a proposed motion, but we can wordsmith this just to get everybody thinking. And what I would propose is that the Parks and Recreation Commission approves the Darien Foundation and the Darien Athletic Foundation to apply on its behalf for the necessary approvals to develop the area of Weed Beach, formerly known as Short Lane, and the surrounding land, as well as a series of walking paths to connect the entirety of Weed Beach Park. The proposed plan should be consistent with concepts detailed in the Park and Recreation Master Plan approved in February of 2018. The foundations, with the support of the design firm Weston and Sampson, will report to the Commission on their progress on a regular basis. Open for discussion. Questions? Commission members? It's weird.
Yeah, what do we grab it?
It's a little awkward. Okay.
Did we decide not to do a building committee of any sort, so it's just gonna be the foundation handling every aspect of it and reporting back to the commission as needed, or talking to?
I'll be
Yeah. You're gonna be the liaison with them?
Yeah, the selectmen do not feel that we need a building committee to scope of this project. Okay, we'll discuss that with Jamie and Ms. Lambert.
Excellent. No, I just wanted
Did
to
you want
clarify.
one more? Were we gonna ask one more commission member if they wanted to go on to be a liaison?
We could have an additional liaison, just help support Pam when I'm not available. But it will not be a formal building committee.
Yeah, just advisory, which kind of sounds fine.
Any other questions? Comments? Ready to vote? Sure. That was easy. Okay, I need somebody to make that motion. Susan? Okay, second. Mary Louise? Okay, all in favor? Okay. Now, we also wanted to talk about the naming of the project this evening. Does Sarah want to do that?
Hi, my name is Sarah Woodbury. I'm the Executive Director of the Darien Foundation. And I'm here to talk about the improvement of the Short Lane property and the sort of connection of the trails. We have been engaged in this project with Pam and Parks and Rec, and we wanted to come up with a better name for it than the former Short Lane property. First of all, I should say thank you, by the way, for having me, everybody here, and thank you all the members of the community for being here and participating. So appreciate being here. So we went through some names. We wanted to come up with a better name for this project. Right now it's sort of, I think the Parks Department has improved it somewhat, but it's a bit of scrub brush that is underutilized, and they're hoping to have it a place people can picnic and spend time at. So we went around with a bunch of different names. We had 18 names that were submitted by Parks members, people at either foundation or people we had talked to. And we had a round of voting. We narrowed it down to 6 names. Then we had another round of voting, and it came down to Weed Beach, Trail, and Meadow. And I think that addresses both renaming the Short Lane area and also the fact that there will be this wonderful 1-mile path that will connect parts of the park that haven't been there, that I understand will still not necessarily be developed, but you'll be able to take a lovely stroll through the woods, circle back. There's a lot of underutilized, I guess there's sort of a trail there, but it's not really utilized. So that is the proposal, and part of the impetus for this is because we plan to go public with a press release. Also, it's something that we want people to actually be able to understand, because the Short Lane property is confusing. And for example, Opus recently sent out a party invitation to meet to have their event on the Short Lane Beach, and people were sort of like, what is that? Short Lane Field or whatever. So we'd love to have an actual name for this and I believe since you all participated in this, that it's something that, I don't know, how does this work? I'm here just following up on it, so.
So the name would be the project name.
The project name.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the project name, Weed Beach Trail and Meadow, is for this until the completion of the project. But our hopes are that people will take that project name and maybe refer to, say, I'm going down to the meadow tonight, which would be the Short Lane area. So if we're having an event down there, it's not just what part of the Weed Beach are you going to, but we're going to the meadow area, or we're going to the trail. So I thought that it's rather clever, nice.
So that would encompass the beach too? Like, cause she just mentioned that the Short Lane Beach area, so.
Right, but the project itself,
It's gonna be.
it's the entirety of
High
it.
area,
But the project name is the Weed Beach Trail and Meadow, we would like it to be.
the reason I'm asking is because I've been listening to the videos of the Pear Tree, and there's like the West Beach, the South Beach, so
Right.
I just think that if you do start delineating it more, it'll be easier for people to have an invitation to say, we're gonna be at this part of the, you know. I just, you know, I know that name won't help the
Right,
situation.
it's strictly a project name, so
Yeah.
that we can
I
market
think
it.
it works.
Okay,
for
so
Project.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
actually need to jump in here because we had this conversation last time and we wanted to start with this as a project name, but you know, I've been in emails with Lori and with Pam, and we are hoping to submit this not only as a project name, but also as contention for the actual name, because we think that it, you know, it's confusing if 3 months from now, people decide they wanna change the name. So that was why we spent a lot of time in, you know, going through this name. I mean, we are committing it's a very large grant on behalf of both the Darien Foundation and the Darien Athletic Foundation. So that's why we sort of want to come up with and we invited the Parks Commission to submit names and vote. We just would like to come up to a consensus that works for everybody because, you know, in our experience, we were founded as the Darien Technology Foundation, then we were the Technology and Community Foundation. There's a lot of confusion when names get changed, and we feel like, you know, this is a community project. People are getting invitations to go to Picnic East, they're going the short lane, and when I mention short lane field, no one knows what I'm talking about, and then I say that's scrubby thing on the edge of the beach that we wanna make just a place where you can have a grassy picnic, and then they understand. But, so, I think that this proposal is to name the project with a view to also having it be the complete name, so if that is an issue, then maybe we should address it, if that works for the commission.
Thoughts, comments? So I think what Sarah's saying is the idea would be, the expectation is that that section of the property the whole would really be sort of, the name it would be referred to as the meadow.
Can I ask why you didn't call it the Lee Beach Meadow and Trails instead? It seems easier to shorten, but it's no big deal. It's
You know
just-
what, I think that that's an easy change to make. I mean, there was also, and again,
Either way.
there were a lot of people who liked the idea of calling it Nearwater Meadow or something, but there was some concern, I understood from the Parks Commission, that would confuse people, that it might not be at Weed Beach. So there are, you know, and the final vote was Weed Beach Trail and Meadow, but I think if people really felt strongly it could be Weed Beach Meadow and Trail, I don't think that is an issue. I don't know, what do you all feel?
So you're just proposing flip the words meadow and trail.
Yeah, because I think people will naturally shorten it, so it's logical.
Right.
Just to avoid confusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think people will probably use one or the other, right? I'm gonna go walk on the trail,
Right,
I'm gonna
or
go
the
meet
meadow.
people in the
Yeah.
meadow, but obviously we want it to be something that works for the community and for the Parks Commission, so.
But if we're connecting the whole beach, there's a trail already that exists in the rest of the beach. So now we're saying that the trail's only on this part of the beach? Do you see, you know, because this is this connection is gonna go back to the back of the tennis courts, come back around, so that's the trail too. So
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah,
not really
not
this
just,
area.
not just the meadow. I mean, the meadow is one area that's gonna have a
Right.
trail in it, and the trail is the entire
But Susan's
project.
saying by saying the meadow and trail, you've
Saying
got two
the
different
trails.
trails, but you're how are they connecting? I think
So that's why it's Weed Beach really meadow, and that the trail goes around the whole park. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I just,
Something to think about.
I already
If we're gonna
explained it
keep
that
the
way.
name consistent and we're never gonna change it, we could even call that the Meadow Beach. But what I'm saying is, there's already a trail that we made in Weed Beach 1 that goes around the other side of the park, and that originally was gonna come back around to where the sand dune area is and, you know, connect. And eventually, you know, now that we have this property, we didn't have that property. So that's my only concern, is that there really isn't one trail.
several trails.
There's 2 trails, but they're gonna make them connect
Right.
to the rest of the park. So my preference, if we're gonna keep it one name, is to make it Weed Beach Meadows, I think, just because it makes more sense than Weed Beach.
And the trails can go everywhere.
The trail's gonna go all around the whole beach. Does that make, I don't know.
Yeah, if I could just kind of add some 2 cents in here. So first off, I think we have to express our appreciation to Darien Foundation and Darien Athletic Foundation for this amazing gift and you know, to the community. And I think through the gift, I think part of the spirit of it is to kind of create the ability to kind of circumnavigate all of Weed Beach.
Right.
So I think the meadow is important, but from my perspective, I think, you know, equally important, and I think your goal is to kind of highlight that
Right.
And also highlight the association of that gift with the source of the gift.
Right.
Is kind of this trail network now that will be kind of improved, and an element of the trail network will be kind of meadow area, the green space, but, so I think my sense is that's, I guess, just to clarify, my sense is that's why you're kind of teasing out that aspect of it, and that's why you wanna
Right. I mean,
create the
that's like-
recognition around that aspect of it, right?
Right, I mean, actually, when Pam initially came to us, it was just for the short lane, because she wanted to do the trail sort of development, connecting it as phase 2, and it's a big ticket to step up to do both, and that was something that we thought there was suggestion that it would be a wonderful gift for the town for the 200th anniversary, especially since the birthday party is gonna be at Weed Beach. And I think it's sort of selling, I mean, this is a significant gift, and it's, a big chunk of it is the trail. So I think just calling it the Weed Beach Meadow, shortchanges all the effort and energy that's put into this wonderful.
Well, let me just
resource.
kind of clarify. It sounds to me that as kind of the source of the gift, of course, you know, the commission has to make a decision.
Right, right.
But as the source of the gift, your preference or your request to us would be to highlight the trail in the naming. Is that, am I getting it right? There's a
the
name.
names
Name
we
includes
had-
trail and meadow, but I'm getting the sense your emphasis and the emphasis of it.
I'm okay, I mean, I think I could go back to the boards, and I think that they're willing, if people feel like it's better to be Weed Beach Meadow and Trail, I'm totally open to that kind of feedback, but I think Weed Beach Meadow alone was one of the names, and Weed Beach Trail alone was one of the names, and they did not get very many. You know, there was just not a lot of enthusiasm for them, I think, and actually, I remembered Susan actually bringing this up at the last meeting, saying, because there was a discussion of it calling it the boardwalk, or just the trail, and saying that that doesn't encompass the whole project, because it's two facets to this project. There's the improvement of the short lane field that's being underutilized, and there is the making that trail that a lot of people don't even know exists, usable for all different constituents of Darien. So that is how that name sort of became the one that everyone rallied around.
So your request and your preference and the preference of those who are giving us the gift is what?
Well, we came up with Weed Beach Trail and Meadow. I think it's very much the same to call it Weed Beach Meadow and Trail, but I feel that that we want that we're open to, if you feel strongly that it should be flipped, absolutely, or the Parks Commission, I think that that's an important voice, but I think that to drop the trail, that suddenly a part of the project is not being acknowledged.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to me a major source of the funding is going to improve the trail network.
Right, a third, so.
Yeah, okay.
Other commission member comments?
I think just keeping in the trail just highlights what people can do down there. You know, it's like Weed Beach is just such an active beach itself, so it just highlights that you can go down there for the beach, you can go down there for the meadow, you can go down there for the trail, and it's just a great, you know, just highlights that. And I like meadow first. I feel like it rolls off your tongue better.
I like it a lot. I'm really appreciative of your gift. We're appreciative of your gift. I think the word meadow is incredibly inviting, and I think trail is a descriptor. I would go with exactly what you have, and I would say Weed Beach Trail and Meadow, because I think Weed Beach Trail is the whole beach, and Meadow is a subset. I'm not really wedded one way or another, so whatever you decide, I like the name either way. Thanks.
Anyone else? I mean, my thinking is that the trail was a key part of the proposal. It's certainly in keeping with the interests and priorities of the Darien Athletic Foundation, which is to support wellness in our community, and the idea of the trail is to provide wellness in a walking area. And again, if you're referring back to the master plan, which I refer to very frequently, improving and increasing and providing walking trails in town was considered a priority item. So I think to have that in the name and highlight to people that we're delivering one of the things that was asked for and highly sought after, I think to be able to advertise that through the name would be a really great thing.
And by the way, just apologize for interrupting, but it was one of the top 5, in fact, priorities in the master plan to increase number and connectivity of trails and pathways.
Right. I'm okay with keeping the trail name in, but I would prefer, if we could, to make Meadow the first thing, like Erica suggested, only because there's a tendency when you have a long name to kind of shorten it, and it's gonna be easier for us to say, we beat the meadow area. Like when if we rent it, I'm saying, and things like that. And I'm not discounting that you're doing a lot of work on the trails will still be there, but I prefer that be right after Wheat Beach personally, because I think it kind of, you know, really specifies that area as an area versus the amenity that you're offering, so, I don't know. But I'm fine with either way, I mean, ultimately, because it's a beautiful gift, and we're gonna get something that we have never had before, and that we didn't have a plan to have in the near future. So we're very grateful.
Exactly, yeah, I mean, I think I'm fine with you all making that call, whether it's meadow or trail. I mean, I would double back to the boards, but I think that people are open to that, so is that what your recommendation is as the Parks and Rec?
I guess how many are meadow first?
So now first.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I'm good with it. I mean,
6.
I
Come on,
think we're,
I'm
you know,
happy with that.
And trail's still there, trail will still stay.
So that seems to be the preference. So do you think that's something you need to circle back with your groups on?
Well, I think it, you know, I don't know how the procedure is. I think it would be good if I don't think that there's gonna be a big uprising or anything, but I think it would be good if I went back and said, you know, here's what the, whatever, but I don't wanna slow down I think maybe in order to move forward, because we've got a lot going on for the summer, that we maybe would go ahead and make that change and codify that, and if for some reason we need to discuss it again, which I do not expect, then we can revisit that, so that we don't slow people down and slow you all down, and, you know, we have more important aspects of this project to focus on.
The name is so important.
Sarah, you know you wanna start doing publicity, though. So
Right, I think that
don't wanna slow
the
that
press
down.
release, I know Jamie Stevenson, we had talked about doing a photo shoot and getting the word out. I mean, people don't know about it, so. And I know there's gonna be a public hearing and all sorts of, we want feedback from everyone, so it's definitely, people haven't had a chance to even comment on it because they don't know that.
So which one are we taking a vote on? Meadow and trail. Beach, meadow and trail. Trail or trails?
It's one loop
Right.
trail,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Meadow and
Singular.
trail. Singular, I just wanna be abundantly clear. Okay. So we beach, okay.
There are multiple trails.
I know, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, but it's a trail network.
It's a trail network. Okay, we're going for trail singular. Yes. Sarah?
What is the prevailing, I think that
I
again.
think you said trail.
You said trail.
We said trail, I think because it had riveted off the fact that we understand this to be one circular trail. Are you saying there are different?
No, I think it should be singular.
In
I
the
think it should
meadow
be trail.
area, there are gonna be there's gonna be like another shorter trail. So you don't have to do the one large, you can do a shorter version,
Gotcha.
so that's all.
Well,
Unless
should
you
we
wanna call it
start
trails.
with the singular, and if we feel that it's robust enough later, we could add an S? Does that work for you guys? Just so that I-
Sounds fine with me.
Sounds reasonable. Just trying to be reasonable, just trying to be very specific.
Yeah,
Okay.
good idea.
So I think we have a motion to accept the use of Wheat Beach, meadow, and trail. Meadow or meadows? I'm sorry.
It's
Meadow.
meadow, right?
Meadow.
It's the short lane
Meadow
field
and
that's
trail.
we're renaming
Wheat
because.
Beach, meadow, or trail. Okay, so someone will make that
So moved.
motion. Thank you, Mike. I'll second it. Thanks, Erica. Okay, all in favor? Okay, I think we're good.
Yay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much. Okay, that's it on V Beach, right? We didn't have, those were 2 activities.
That's it.
And Jamie, I'll give you a copy of the motion language, unless you worry it's right, really.
I really wasn't. I
I
caught the
think
first
so.
like sentence. Thank you.
So I will get that to you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we are going to move into a joint meeting with the Pear Tree Building Committee. Mike, I need you or Randy to
Yes.
call your committee meeting to
Yes,
order.
so can we invite the members of the committee
And
to
invite
come-
members of the
come
committee.
up? Yep, and then once we're settled in, I'll pull the meeting to order. Yep. Can you? Okay, that's great.
No, it's just review. That's why she's.
Yeah, I should sit down. This is, I should
It's really hard knowing, we're gonna try to try not to everybody.
Lori? I'll call it to order and then you'll, as our
Hold up,
host,
working out, you're looking very toned.
I'll call to order and then you'll make some comments, kick things off. And then Lori, then I'll make some comments. Okay, I think we're all set. Okay, so if I may, this is, please, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is July 17th, and this is a special meeting of the Pear Street Beach Building Committee. In fact, obviously, it's a joint meeting that we're having with the Parks and Recreation Commission. At this point, I'll turn it over to Lori to make some opening comments. I'll make some opening comments, and then we'll move along in the agenda. So, thank you for having us.
Okay, thank you for being here. I think it was very good that we're doing this. So we scheduled the joint meeting this evening with the commission so that the commission can hear from both the professionals and the building committee as to where they are and to provide guidance on some of the key decision points. In order to set the stage for this evening's discussion, I wanted to start by refreshing everyone's memory and reviewing key elements of the Park Master Plan, because that's really where all of this started. The Park Master Plan specifically cites the need for updating Pear Tree Beach as an area for improvement and was cited as a weakness to the Parks and Recreation Commission. A top priority was to maintain and make improvements to existing facilities, and that means globally as a whole in the town. So that's where I mean specifically. On page 54 of the plan, in the section which addresses, this was a question, what are the most important areas that if addressed by the town would increase your utilization of parks and recreation facilities? And the highest ranked item with 57% of the respondents was the condition and maintenance of parks or facilities. And then it was followed by more facilities and amenities as the number 2, with 40 and 57% respectively of the two types of surveys that were sent out. There was an overwhelming public response to make sure that the Parks and Recreation maintains and improves existing facilities. The department should continue to improve and upgrade. This was from the written text of the report. The department should continue to improve and upgrade existing facilities and amenities. Demand for usage of Darien parks, beaches, and athletic facilities continue to grow, and the department should look for opportunities to add new amenities to enhance the experience for users. Some enhancements identified through the public process included providing shade to parks, newer improved restrooms, as well as other items such as paddle courts and pickleball, which aren't particularly relevant to this evening's discussion. Page 69 details the recommendations specific to Pear Tree Point Beach. Included, and again, this is not all of them, but specific to this evening's discussion, were references to the concession and bathhouse to rehabilitate or replace outdated concession bathhouse building and improve the concession facilities. Another key bullet point was resiliency, which was to improve beach resiliency and reduce wind water erosion by increasing natural shoreline areas and to install a seawall or snow fence as appropriate. Specific objectives were set in the report, and those relevant for discussion this evening are Objective 4.1 of the Master Parks Plan, which is to maintain and improve existing park facilities, to enable improved access for all ages and abilities, to upgrade existing structures and site amenities. That was ranked as a high priority and had pretty much the most amount of points. Objective 4.9 was specific to Pear Tree Point Beach, and it said renovate and update Pear Tree Point Beach, including pavilion, concession area, restoration of shoreline, ADA renovations, and shade, and that also was ranked high. Objective 4.8 states to provide additional shaded beaches, and that was ranked as moderate. And lastly, and it was specific to ADA compliance, was to improve accessibility of paths, amenities, and existing park structures, and that was rated as high. So I just want to highlight some of the objectives that were set out to the Parks and Recreation Commission through the extensive community input that we received and with the assistance of Bldg and his team at Weston and Sampson. I'm just taking the time to review this to provide context for this evening's discussion. This parcel of land is very challenging to work with. The committee and the commission understand that. The West Beach is very narrow. The boat ramp creates need for wide turning radius and trailer parking, which is challenging on this site. There is only one road, Pear Tree Point Road, which is narrow and does not have sidewalks in and out. There is a history of the parking lot flooding, the sand being washed into the parking lot and then swept back with the dirt, debris, and oils from the parking lot, which is considered unsanitary by many. The police department has historically been accommodated with exclusive use of a portion of the building. That's another issue we have to deal with. The building committee is working very hard to thoughtfully consider how best to navigate these challenges with the support and expertise of Neil Hawk, who's an architect, and Weston and Sampson, who brings the requisite expertise in the environmental considerations of this parcel. They are considering all of the public input that they are receiving, and the committee is having spirited debate among themselves. This is part of a healthy process, and I want to thank each of them for the considerable time commitment they have made. I ask everyone to listen to the presentations this evening and consider all of the information in the context of the charge and objectives set out by the master plan.
Thank you very much, Lori. I'm in a unique position of being both on the committee and the commission. So through this evening, I'm inevitably going to talk from two different perspectives, and I'm going to make every effort to point out what perspective I'm speaking from when I do that. So I don't have two hats with me, but if you guys are confused about that or if I'm not clear, just ask me. So there'll be moments when I'm speaking in my role as the co-chair of the building committee, and there'll be moments where I think when the commission is canvassed that I'll be speaking in my capacity as a member of the commission. Honestly, I'm honored to be in both of those positions, just to kind of set that aside. So, as Lori's pointed out, the committee was formed back in October. It's a building committee. There have been other building committees that have been formed in the town over the years. This is a little unique, I guess, to Lori's point, because it's kind of the aspects of this are not quite as straightforward as an example as the DPW facility that the town went through. That's quite clear. Somebody like Ed Gentile can say, I need these 27 things, and without that I can't do my job. This is a little different. And so to a certain extent, some of this is subjective, and you see that element kind of that works its way through here. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, as I said, we've been working together now since October. I'll share some comments about that at kind of the tail end of all this. But I think through that, there have been various points at which I've come back to the commission and updated the commission on our progress. Most recently, in April, I think it was April 24th, I provided an update to the commission. So my sense is you guys have a sense of how things have been progressing. Neil has continued to remind me, and thank you very much, Neil. There are 4 phases that we defined when we kind of carved out this project. Oh, 5, okay, but when we carved out the project. And the first of which is programming and schematic design, and essentially kind of information gathering as well. So we're still in this first phase. We're not jumping to any conclusions. It is complex. There are multiple. It's kind of multidimensional. We've been working very hard to inform ourselves and educate ourselves on a lot of topics, including the FEMA and regulatory requirements, what DEEP might be expecting of us, planning and zoning requirements in the town, and a whole slew of other things. And I'm guessing by the time we're finished with this process, we may not necessarily be able to call ourselves experts, but we'll certainly be better informed than when we started. And I know, not speaking for myself, but certainly speaking on, for my fellow committee members, I know how hard everybody's working to kind of work through that process. Having said all of that, with the work we've done, I think we're at a very important inflection point now where it's critical for us to come back to the commission and seek guidance from the commission. There are a number of options that have been presented to us, Neil will go through those options this evening. He'll share that with us. Where I feel, and I think my co-committee members will probably say the same, that we're at a juncture here where it's going to be difficult for us to go forward without getting clarity on the objectives from the commission. I'll refer you in the packet that was handed out to the last page. And in that last page, I'll take you through it in a moment, but before we go through that, I just want to echo a couple of things, or certainly to add to a couple of things that Lori had pointed out. And these also come out of the master plan. So referring into the master plan, if I could, just a couple of items here. So in the survey that was taken, in terms of household priorities,
There are two handouts.
There's two handouts.
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
The one on the 17th, right?
The handout from the 17th, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll just wait till you guys settle in.
Yep.
The last page was the 17th.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to that in a moment, but before I get to that, I just want to kind of add a couple of supporting bits of data here for us. If anybody needs one, we can take mine. Do you need another one down there? Okay, so just kind of referring back to the survey that was taken as part of the master plan. In terms of household priorities that were articulated by the community, first was add aquatics facility, swimming pool. The second is preserve open space, land acquisition, and the third, in fact, is improve Pear Tree Point Beach. And it does say improve Pear Tree Point Beach in the survey results. And that's under household priorities. Under most important needs, the first under most important needs, and once again, this is all on the website, it's publicly accessible. The first is preserve open space land acquisition, and the second is improve Pear Tree Point Beach Park. And once again, these are different cuts to solicit information from the public. So that's, in that particular cut, it turns out to be the second item on the list, improve Pear Tree Point Beach Park. And then in most important needs for the town of Darien over the next 5 to 10 years, and once again, separate invitation sample. The second item on the list is improve Pear Tree Point Beach Park. And on a scale of 1, it's actually like yellow, but on a scale of 1 to 5, the last two being very important and important, 60% fall into the very important and important range. So just to clarify for the commission, the work that was done and the data that came out of the survey. So that's one point. So moving on to the last page that's in the packet here. Basically what you have here is a few bits of information, and then I'll turn it over to Neil. So across the top, you've got these Roman numerals from 1 to 10. The intention of the Roman numerals is just to create a kind of cross-reference so that when we talk about this, we could say we're talking about item 5 or item 6, or apologize for doing it in Roman, but it just seemed like a good thing to do. The first line down is the commission objectives. So what I've done here is I've just outlined, oh, by the way, one other clarification here. This discussion this evening is principally at this stage, obviously we've got, as I mentioned, this is a complex multi-dimensional product. There's project, there's the buildings, there's the environmental aspects, there's what we're potentially doing with the boat ramp. The focus of this evening's conversation, because of the way in which we've progressed as a committee through the discussions, are on the building structures. The intention will be to come back to the commission when we feel we're at that stage and have a similar conversation around the environmental aspects. We're just not ready yet. In terms of the way we've kind of progressed through in the cadence, we turned our attention for the reasons that should be self-evident here to these first few items, because those were the first few items on the objectives that we were given, that were provided to us by the commission. So there'll be an update. We've got Dan with us. Dan will give the commission at a point in the conversation an update on where we are with the environmental aspects of it. But the principal, kind of the core element of tonight's discussion is around the building elements. So what I'd like to do is the following then. I'll remind you, and it's also, as I'm reminding myself, it's around the what and now the how, and not the how. Okay, so what we want to understand from you guys is what you're asking the building committee to do. We're not going to discuss and get into the details at this stage how we intend to do that. What we need clarification on is what you're asking us to do. And if you have questions around the what, around the how, please ask us. But from my perspective, that's kind of, we see that as kind of within the purview of the building committee you don't have to worry about that, as long as you can kind of give us guidance around the how. Now, as we're progressing, if we run into bumps in the road around the how that we think you need to be aware of, we'll bring that back to you, but not this evening. So what I have here is that first line under the Roman numerals are the objectives. Now, these are the objectives that were kind of set by the commission, were voted on the commission, voted on by the commission last year, and that worked their way into the charge of the building committee and ultimately into the RFP that went out for design services. So these objectives are driving everything that we're doing. And this is what we need clarification on. What you see below the objectives are kind of the bifurcation that we're kind of, the fork in the road that we're at the moment. One leg of that fork in the road is renovate, and the other leg of the fork in the road is build something new. And what I'd like to do is just use that now to set the stage for the following conversation. I don't feel as though, until we kind of have Neil go through this with us, I think I'd rather leave this at the moment, but I would just remind us of the commission's objectives. So the first objective was essentially build a new elevated bathhouse concession building in the existing location, which was concept B, because we had concept A, which had that building in another location from the master park plan. So this is the first objective that you gave to the building committee. The second was the addition of an outdoor dining area and deck around the concession building, which was also from concept B from the master park plan. So build a new building, an elevated building, build a deck around it, and then the third element of that, which and I could provide a little bit more background in this, is the addition of flexible community space, flexible space for community use. And just to remind the commission, when that set of the initial set of objectives was drawn up, that set of objectives included flexible 2 rooms for flexible meeting space to be used on a year-round basis. I think we recognized soon after that was kind of set that we had kind of expanded the definition of what the commission had originally voted on. We came back, we had a robust discussion, and that particular objective got translated into what's here under item 3, flexible space for community use. And as we go through it, you'll understand that there's been a great deal of discussion around the size of that, the nature of it, the use of it, and we're hoping we can kind of get some clarity around that. The other thing that I'd just like to ask before I turn it over is, I've committed to these folks who've been working really, really hard on the committee that, this will be a robust and open conversation. So, we're hoping that, there's a good dialogue here because, it's important that all of us on the committee come away from this discussion with a common understanding of what you guys are asking for. And it's critical at this stage. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to make much more progress, and we're going to be hanging these guys up, and that's just not going to work for anybody. So, with that as my preamble, Lori, you're okay with turning it over to these guys? Okay. So, please. Do we want to do anything with lights, or do you need lights? Maybe the front. Amy, maybe there.
So, Dan, I thought you were going to be here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go here. I thought you were going to use this. Okay.
I think we can do
There you go.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that good?
Okay.
Put the back on, I think.
The back can remain on.
We can see.
back on. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much.
Okay, so, just to bring the commission up to speed, we have now been working on this project for about 2 months. And there are 5 phases to our work in a project like this. The first phase, which is the phase that we're at the tail end of now, is a programming and schematic design phase. So this really starts with information gathering. So we've done things like we've gone to the beach, we have become familiar with the existing conditions, we've looked at Weed Beach and compared Pear Tree to that. We have researched the Darien zoning regulations and the FEMA regulations, and kind of gotten our hands around the issues that we're gonna be forced to deal with as we design the building component of this project. Of course, there's a landscape and environmental component as well that Dan will speak to in a little bit. But right now, we're at a point where, as Mike said, we've explored a number of different options, and we really need input from the commission if we are to make the next step and begin to develop a set design. So right now, nothing is set in stone. They're just sort of concepts, broad concepts that we've been exploring. So we started by, as I said, looking at Weed Beach and Pear Tree and combining them. And as you can see here, the Weed Beach land area is quite a bit larger than Pear Tree. In fact, when we compared it, Weed Beach has almost 3 times the land area that Pear Tree does. It's also a much more intensive use in terms of the activities provided. There's tennis, there's paddle tennis, there's a playground for kids, there are trails that are being worked on now that were part of the initial design that I was involved with 10 or 12 years ago. So it's a much more intensive use, and yet if you compare the parking spaces, Pear Tree has 220 spaces and Weed has only 135, plus there is some overflow parking area. We couldn't determine exactly how many cars could park there, but the point is that we realized that Weed Beach is much larger but has fewer parking spaces. And so one thing we wondered was how important it was to keep the full 220 spaces, and if we did some things to the layout that would improve the beach or make the beach more sustainable and perhaps even larger, we might lose parking, and what kind of effect would that have? So that's one of the things that we learned and we looked at early on. The next thing we came to terms with was the FEMA requirement that any enclosed habitable space that's new has to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. In this case, the base flood elevation for the entire site is 15. It's a velocity zone, and whatever new components we design would have to be elevated to that elevation. The existing bathhouse is just about elevation 8, 7.92. So what that means is that we would have to raise the new elements 9 feet above grade. Not a ton of height. It's essentially 1 story. Most houses today have 9-foot ceilings in the first floor, sometimes both floors. So it's essentially 1 story in height. And to get that 1 story in height, there are a couple of ways to do it. We can do stairs, in which case we need 16 risers. We could do a wheelchair ramp, in which case that would have to be 134 feet long in order to meet the accessibility code. So a third option would be, of course, to have an elevator. So with this slide, we were looking at different ways to accomplish getting from the grade of the existing bathhouse, which is the parking lot, to elevation 17. In approach number 1, we would have an elevator. In approach number 2 and 3, we would have a ramp that sort of wraps around to different landing points. In approach 3, we thought, well, maybe we would actually make a little feature of each of the landings, so that rather than just have a small landing, you might expand that and provide an exciting place to sit and look at the water, perhaps, you know, have a bite to eat. And then with approach number 4, we were thinking that, well, if we have to do a ramp, why not make it sort of a fun experience so that it's not just a way to get from point A to point B, but maybe it connects other elements like the gazebo on the path along the way. Next, we took the building program elements that we were given 2 months ago when we met with the commission, and we looked at various ways to configure them. And one of the issues that we really struggled with was just exactly what was this flexible community space, how large should it be, how was it going to be used, is it the kind of thing that should be heated and can be used all year, or is it something that can just be used during the summer months? Is it even enclosed, or is it sort of a covered open area? So we started with a fairly ambitious plan that encompassed about 2,000 square feet of this flexible space. And then we presented 2 other schemes that were slightly smaller. This one was about 1,400 square feet, and then this one came in at about, I think, 1,200 square feet. But after this particular meeting, there was a lot of discussion between committee members and also some opinions voiced by members of the community. And I think we all realized that this was a hot potato and potentially an area that we need more input on. And so then we went back and looked at some of the other community spaces that we've been involved with in town. And in this slide, what you see on the left is the gathering space at the paddle hut at Reed Beach. It's about 912 square feet. The middle slide is showing the Darien Historical Society, the existing library that's used for meetings and informal gatherings. That's about 416 square feet. Ultimately, we ended up with a design for flexible meetings, community space, that was approximately 476 square feet. That's what you see on the right there. And that's what we presented the following meeting. And I'd like to take you through 2 of the plans we came up with at that meeting. So that would have been 2 meetings ago. In this case, this is the first floor. We would take the 2 components of the existing bathhouse structure, the bathroom pod and the other pod that houses the concession, the lifeguard shack, the first aid area, and a small storage area for police. And we would use the funds that are available according to the FEMA guidelines to renovate these 2 structures. FEMA dictates that if you are to keep a structure that's non-conforming and you want to improve it, you're limited to spending no more than 50% of the assessed value of the building, not counting the land.
Appraised value.
I'm sorry, appraised value of the building itself, not counting the land. So in this case, we would end up being able to spend about $28,000 plus or minus on the bathroom pod, and I think it's more like $50,000 or $60,000 on the other component. So we were hoping to be able to keep the bathrooms at grade, and I think it's also a good idea to have the lifeguards and the first aid at grade at the beach elevation if possible. So that was our first approach. And then what we were planning to do in order to keep the scale of everything down would be on the second floor to add a level deck at elevation 17 that would have two enclosed components on it. One would be the new concession, and that's the area that you see sort of out right here. That would be the new concession. And then this would be the flexible community space with an open deck covered area in between, and the ability to open large expanses of glass, be it nano wall or some similar component, to have this be totally open in nice weather. There'd be a stair coming up from the parking lot on each side, and then in this case, a system of ramps that would lead up to a landing, up again to the level of the gazebo, and then up again to the level of the elevated deck. And that looks something like this in model form. So you can see here, there's the gazebo, these are the ramps that wrap up to the elevated elevated deck platform. They have a flat roof on it, so this would only, the flat roof elevation in this design, it's approximately 4 feet above the peak, the ridge of the existing building, so not too dissimilar in scale. Stairs coming up from the parking lot, and here's the open area in between. In Plan B, we essentially kept the building the same, but we took a slightly more creative approach to the ramp. So in this case, the ramp would actually be radiused. It would start here, it would work up to the gazebo deck elevation, and then it would wrap back again and stop it and create sort of an elevated viewing platform midway between the elevation of the gazebo and the upper platform here. So that just creates a really nice area for someone to stop between the two breakwaters and look out to that part of the sound. So this is what that would look like in model form. You can see here this elevated dining platform. Viewing platform. So this slide compares the existing structure on the left with the proposed scheme on the right. So you can see that it's slightly larger in footprint. And essentially the concept is that this elevated structure at elevation 17 would span over the existing bathhouse components below. And that would allow us to preserve them and to not build a larger mass of structure. Again, just a comparison of the existing versus the proposed new. And again, this is very schematic. It's a massive model. It's just meant to give 3 dimensions to the concepts we're talking about. After that meeting, 2 meetings ago, at the end of that meeting, the committee members asked if we could look at a plan that simply left the existing structure in place with minor modifications and then created a series of platforms that could be used for dining, sitting, viewing the water, and experiencing the beach. So we came back to the last meeting with, we actually explored a number of ideas, but we presented one of them at the last meeting, and that's this one. And in this concept, this would be essentially the level of the parking lot, which is the level of the existing pavilion. There'd be a ramp up to this midpoint with stairs coming up, oops, all right. So, in this case, once again, a ramp would come up to the first platform, which would have ample room for looking out this way, you have access from the west beach up, and perhaps some bleacher type seating in this location where people can sit and wait for something from the existing concession. Then a ramp would go up to the next level, which is the level of the gazebo, and here again we'd have room for perhaps dining tables or seating. And then a few steps down to a slightly lower level where there'd be bench seating wrapping around. And so you get wonderful areas for looking at the beach from this outcropping that's the highest point of the site. So that really takes you through this information gathering phase that we've been going through, and the exploration of ideas and concepts and ways to get from grade to the elevated platform, assuming we have one. And now, we're at a point where we really do need clarification on some of the elements of the building program. So, starting with the new elevated structure.
Can I just stop one second?
Yeah.
So, Lori, at what stage how would you like to, because I think what we want to do is have just a good open conversation about this.
Absolutely.
So, what are we saying? We'll go through these one-on-one. I guess maybe
Well,
before
we
we do
can
that,
do
does
that.
anybody want any clarification? Because first off, anybody on the commission like any further clarification on anything that Neil's just gone through? Because we've gone through it kind of a brisk pace. Yep. Yes.
Hi, Neil.
Hi.
Can you clarify what you mean by minimal update to the existing buildings in the AU renovation?
Okay, so that addresses what I was talking about, the limits that that FEMA allows us to spend
Okay.
on the buildings if we're not making them conform to the FEMA regs.
Right, the 20 and the 50.
Yes.
So, is the 28 gonna get us new bathrooms?
We're hoping it will, but we'll be hard pressed to make them look, very nice. I mean, you might get some new fixtures and some paint and that sort of thing.
Not a lot.
I don't think there'll be enough money around to substantially renovate the interior now.
Okay, and, the 50 for the concession, what does that give us?
I think the 50 is probably more than enough to renovate that unless we're keeping the concession there, because concession equipment counts toward the money that can be spent. We've clarified that. So if the concessionaire is bringing in new equipment, that could put us over the 50,000.
For your other approaches that do include the second floor, if we do the renovations on the bottom, are they limited to that number you just mentioned?
Yes.
So either way, we're looking at not the best renovation of our restrooms and that bottom area.
Correct.
Because that's a big deal, because we're not gonna be able to really make a change down there, and we're wrapping something around it on top. And
Maybe just to kind of add something to that. One of the things that I think we've tried to make work is to preserve restrooms at grade level, at ground level. So that translates to exactly what you guys are kind of poking on now. I mean, if we're doing that, on one hand, yes, we'll get restrooms at ground level. On the other hand, we'll get the restrooms kind of that we have with maybe some updated. So that's kind of
that's a huge challenge.
the
'Cause
trade-off.
the bathroom's in pretty rough shape.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify something. Pear, when we put a hold on some work on Pear Tree because we knew that we thought they were gonna renovate it with electrical. Do you know if that was ever done?
No, we put the electric.
Okay, so that was all upgraded, because that was one of the issues that we hit when we were kind of waiting, because we were like, well, Pear Tree's gonna be done next, we don't wanna spend too much money.
We weren't sure we were gonna do the gatehouse, but we did.
But I'm talking about the actual bathroom area, I'm not talking about the
Oh, no. We did electrical at the street, at the.
No, it was in the
gatehouse.
building that was an issue. I remember that.
We've spent some money on the pumps that just went, things like that, but we didn't upgrade electrical, big enormous upgrade.
I mean, cause I saw that there were some metal conduits that were running around the bathroom, and at least the ladies' room, cause that was the only part I could go into. So I think that looked kinda there.
Yeah, I'd get some clarification on that for you, but I don't think it was a major upgrade.
By the way, one thing.
They had some issues they had to fix.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was getting to the
Yeah.
point where we had to deal with
Yeah.
it, and we were like trying to put it off because we were like, we're getting a new
Right,
building.
exactly.
Kept on thinking in our heads we were getting a new building, so we didn't vote to, we didn't wanna
Exactly.
spend that money.
But one thing that's relevant about what you guys are kind of touching on is FEMA requires a 3-year look back
Yeah,
in terms of kind of determining how much money you have in the pot to spend, so.
Right. I think
not knowing
it was
when that worked.
beyond 3 years ago,
Okay,
trust
good
me.
enough,
I've
yeah.
been
I
on
mean,
the
if we had
commission
spent
too long.
$100,000.
I remember, like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was definitely, you're not gonna hit the look back on
Got it.
anything we did like that. It wasn't a lot.
It was after Sandy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff, yeah, it was definitely after, I think it was after Sandy, but it was, I remember it in the back of my mind that it was like one of the nagging things that we wanted to do something on the building just because of this. But I think that's a real interesting, I mean, dilemma for us to deal
Yep.
with, is that
Oh, yeah.
even after we go through this, the bathrooms were not.
And once again, certainly I've kind of taken the perspective that that is a trade-off. Again, you may not get something that's quite as nice, but at least it's on the ground.
It's renovated, and it's also renovated.
It's at grade level,
And it will be renovated.
to the extent you can for
For
just
that
under
amount of money.
$30,000, but it's at grade level.
Yeah, so one other idea that we had in the office was maybe we flip the two uses and put the bathrooms where the concession is now. It already has plumbing, and that allows us to spend $60,000 for new bathrooms as opposed
And
to
that's
28.
easy, yeah.
So that may work, and we wanna look at that and then determine, well, what goes in the bathroom part now?
Yeah.
Is that lifeguard and first aid,
Lori?
Pam or Mike, can you remind me how we got the valuation that we're using on the buildings?
Yeah.
What was the source of that value?
It's actually from the appraisal cards from the town.
The
If you'd like, I
assessors.
can, the assessor's office, I guess, yeah.
But we didn't actually go out and, for instance, hire a licensed appraiser.
No, we're taking the information that we've got
Cards
from
right
the.
under, it has appraisal.
But I'm not completely clear where the town gets that information and how they come to that. I mean, I'm just wondering whether it would be worthwhile to have it professionally appraised and make sure that there might not be more value there that would give us more money to work with.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a worthwhile exercise.
Because
Martha?
every penny is gonna count in this line of, in this particular path, every nickel
Sure.
counts. So I'm not sure just going by the town card is necessarily
Yeah,
the
yeah,
best
that's a
way
great point.
to go. I mean, even, you know, I work for a bank and I know you can hire 2 licensed appraisers on one property and they
Well, I mean, it's the same with a house appraisal though, if you have an issue with it, you have to meet and,
Say that again, Martha, I'm sorry.
for instance, on a house appraisal, for tax purposes, if you have an issue with how they've appraised your house.
Right,
You have to have, there's a set series of meetings that you have.
Right.
Yep.
So I guess you'd have to challenge the town on their
Yep.
appraisal.
Yep.
but, I mean, I'm just wondering how much effort the town would go to establish the value on its own property. You know what I'm saying? It may not have been a ton of thought put into it. It just may be worth an avenue that we pursue and make sure we're really tight on feeling that's the best possible value that we can get.
Yep. Yes, I did.
I think the flip idea is interesting, but when I joined this committee, I went around to Fairfield, Westport, Greenwich. I went to a number of beaches, went into their restrooms, and most restrooms, including those at Weed Beach, are pretty simplistic. It's a concrete floor, which we have right now, stalls and sinks. Now granted, our sinks are pretty pathetic looking. To me, that's a maintenance issue that should have been attended to long ago. I think in the proposal that was made, we would go from having 2 stalls to 3. There was a determination made that nobody used the interior showers, but there was still gonna be
changing area maintained. It seems to me, and Neil's thought was initially that we should be able to renovate and make a clean, functional bathroom, hopefully at that price.
So that shower inside, I look back on the notes, they're all cold water showers, so
Yeah.
honestly, if you really wanna take a shower, you're probably gonna wanna go home for a real shower.
Exactly.
And the only, I think there's one sink that might have electric heater. I actually tried it yesterday, it didn't work. But I think that there is no hot water in those bathrooms.
Right, and you know, again, this is a residential beach, so people can drive home very easily now. If it's a state park that you've driven 2 hours to, maybe you do feel you need a hot shower. But I don't think that's, you know, part of
But
what's
I
needed
would
at
caution,
this
our beaches are open to anybody,
Well,
so
yes, that's
we have
true,
to, and,
but I mean
and our
primarily it's
notes from
residents.
later in the meeting cite the fact that our daily parking pass revenues are up very considerably, which would indicate that people are coming from elsewhere to use our beaches, so just for what that's worth.
Yeah, and not to dwell on it, but once again, I just think the concept of being able to maintain restrooms at ground level is something to consider, and, you know, with the trade-off that we may not be able to improve them to the extent we'd like to, but at least we don't have to have somebody go up to the next level to use a restroom. So anyway, that's why we've kind of preserved that concept in these plans. And once again, we're not done with anything, but that's why they're still here. And to your point, in spite of the fact that we don't have a big bucket of money to spend on them. Other questions on what Neil's presenting? Clarification, Mike?
Oh, we can still discuss it after.
Yes, yeah.
This is
Just want to make sure before we move on to the next,
Okay.
and from the committee members, anything you guys would like to add or question or get feedback from the commission on before we jump into this from Neil? Mark?
Well, I would like to have the discussion for a few minutes resolve around the question of whether we need program space at Pear Tree Beach. I know we've discussed it on our building committee, and I'd like to hear what the commission has to think about that need.
Mark, can I ask this then? Because we do have that on this list.
All right.
And certainly, to
Okay.
your point, so
Okay.
maybe if we're okay, maybe we can jump into this list then. And I guess the way this is set up is, it's kind of like a, you know, like, as I said, there's a fork in the road, and each of these choices build on one another. So, starting with the first objective then, maybe if we jump into this in the way this is intended to be used. First objective from the commission was, you know, build a new elevated bathhouse concession building, new elevated bathhouse concession building in the existing location. And so the fork in the road that we're at, based upon the conversations we've been having, is, are we building a new elevated structure, or are we renovating the existing structures at ground level? And if you need to get more clarification on what renovation sounds like or means, let's do it now. But that's the first discussion, that's the first decision we need from the commission in terms of guidance. Are we building something new, in which case it's elevated, or are we renovating the existing buildings, in which case we've got roughly $30,000 to spend on one of those buildings and about $60,000 to spend on another building. And we do have the ability to do kind of the decking scenario that, you know, Neil has shared with us, so I don't mean to paint an incomplete picture. But, and I think we need you guys to, and now I'm wearing my committee hat. I'm happy to put my commission hat on in a couple of minutes, but I'm wearing my committee hat now, so we need an answer, because we can't even get to the next set of questions here until we get an answer to, is it new or are we renovating?
Is cost a factor here?
Not to my understanding. You know, I had the benefit of having, you know, a brief conversation with John Zagrodsky and Diana back about a month ago, and I think the guidance at this stage is we're not working within the context of a budget, and, you know, we're being asked to be responsible, but cost is not a factor at this point. It's likely to be something that will be bonded, and so if it's bonded, It's bonded over a 30-year period, and the bonding and the cost for that annually is distributed over X number of households within Darien. So, not to minimize the impact of that, but to answer your question, my understanding is no.
Cost is really only a factor to the extent that renovating the building, we are subject to very tight limitations due to the requirements of.
Yes, from that perspective,
Correct.
yeah.
And you can't, we asked the question, I was fairly sure of this from my banking experience, but you can't just sort of say FEMA, well, we don't have FEMA insurance, so we're gonna ignore that. But we are a participating community, and therefore we must abide by the FEMA rules. They just are what they're. So that's where the limitation comes in, is it just really ties a hand behind our back if we just renovate the building. And that's when I cited why this is such a challenging project. It's because of the limitations, and then you couple that with ADA requirements, which are very important too. It's a tricky balancing act. But we have not been told you can only spend X amount by the Board of Finance.
And I would just add that the guidance from the Board of Finance really is that they're looking to see a design that is meeting the objectives of the town. And I mean, nobody's encouraging people to do anything profligate, but what has happened in the past in Darien is that they've been more conscious on budget than they have on building to the specs that the town needed to meet. And they've ended up having to go back and spend a lot more money to fix things that weren't done right the first time. So we are very focused on making sure that a thoughtful process in making sure that we've met the objectives, the design objectives and the needs of the town before we really start considering budget.
By the way, Diana is speaking now, even as a committee member, as the committee's representative from the Board of Finance, just to clarify.
Yes, sorry.
No. So I'll leave it to you guys how you want to, kind of have the discussion around this particular question, because we got about, we have a bunch of questions here. We've got 10 questions we have to go through.
Just as a
Well, maybe
practical
10.
point, are we done with the overheads?
Unless you want to leave that up there for the purpose of just people referring to it, but otherwise, I
Just
think.
because we're sitting in the dark.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I
and we
think
can look at it on our
Yeah.
last page.
And
We're done.
on 79, and I don't know how that impacts
We're done.
The community's ability
I agree.
to see us. But we're sitting in the dark.
Yes.
Mike, at one point weren't you, I think that Neil was about to make a point on elevated structure that I was interested in hearing. Were you about to make a point of, if you elevated the structure, what some of the requirements were?
Well, the point I was gonna make is, one thing that we haven't shown you is a completely elevated structure.
Right.
Where the lifeguard stations and the bathrooms and all of that are up at the level of 17. And I think if you look at this little massing model from the scheme where we're trying to renovate the existing building and then put a platform above it, this was meant to be the flexible community space, and this was meant to be the concession. I think you could probably add the bathrooms and the lifeguard and first aid station all up here and not significantly increase the mass of this, though you would lose some of the open decking space. So, so. That's yet another option, but in that case, there would be nothing underneath except maybe some boat storage.
And to be ADA compliant, we'd have to have a ramp or an elevator.
Or an elevator. We have done some exploring about elevators. At first, we were really negative on them, but today we learned some new information that might make them a possibility.
What was the negative?
Well, you're in a salt
Yes. that's what I was
environment,
thinking.
so you have to maintain them. And the fellow, what did he say, Brian?
Typical maintenance is once or twice a month.
I know.
And then once it's in that environment, he said you recommend at least 4 times a month, so once a week.
How about flooding and, like if water comes through?
Well, I think that they would be a situation, typically an elevator returns to grade.
Yeah, you would just
In a
leave it
fire
at
or
that.
something, it would be the opposite in this case, it would go up to the upper level. So that if there's a flood, the flood would come around it, it could even potentially get in to the vestibule. It's something to consider, you know?
Sure.
Because otherwise you have 134 feet of ramp for someone in a wheelchair. And it's doable, but it's
Challenging.
challenging.
We have a question for Cheryl.
Yeah, could you just repeat that? You said that if we were to have an elevator,
Yes.
it would have to be maintained. Can you repeat what you said?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how much, but it would have to be maintained more frequently than a typical elevator because of its location near the salt water.
Right, and then you said that,
We were also told there that he said that we'd have to set certain expectations. One being increased maintenance, the fact that certain components of it will rust, things like, not the main part of the elevator, but elements like locks and hinges and door handles. And he said they do make products that are suitable to this location, but you have to have certain expectations. That's going to be
okay, but you did say that it would end up being, maintenance would be at least once a week.
twice as often as normal.
Right. Now, would that be able to be done by our park and rec men, or do we have to hire people that are experienced in elevators?
I do not have that information, but I can find out.
Can you speak to your?
I think,
Yeah.
I would assume that, so then it would be a cost factor. That too would be a cost factor on top of the elevator.
I would have to assume so.
Thank you.
Mike, going back to your objectives here, when I was looking at them, and I've listened to both your meetings, and thank you very much for meeting and just fleshing all of this out. I know it took a lot of time and effort. Each meeting you have is over 2 hours, and it took me into 3 hours of the night to watch both of them. I thought, looking at your list of objectives, that we have to figure out what we want to do with the concession and what we want to do with the community space before we do one. Because one shouldn't be the first thing we decide, because we can't decide one if we don't know if, because you have here.
Well, I'll tell you why it's, I know what I have, but the reason I have
But
it.
like for me, mentally, like I need to work on these.
That's fine,
Yeah,
but-
talk about these first and then.
But concession is, yeah, fair enough.
Right,
And I think
because-
that's, okay.
That makes, because that influences the decision, because like I don't have a decision here, but I think we need to think about these other two things first. Because if we decide a concession is not gonna happen, I'm not saying we are.
Right.
We might not need to do, I mean, these other options might change for us.
Okay, I'm with you, so.
Yeah, I actually agree with that.
Yeah, because otherwise.
I'm not seeing it, but that's okay, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure as we progress through the conversation, I'll see it.
No, I'm thinking of it from like a service delivery point of view and how people are gonna come to the beach, like, they want bathrooms, they want possibly food,
Yeah.
food source. They might want the community, the use room, the fishing pier, so these are the amenities, and if we decide that any of these things, we don't need it, then our footprint will be smaller, or the space we need is smaller.
It's all good, we need decisions tonight.
Okay, so.
Ideally, I mean,
Do you
it's not
have
demanding a
any
decision,
viewpoint
but,
on some of the
we're
feedback?
hung up without a decision.
I got it. Do you have any ideas about the concession? I mean, I went there yesterday and spent some time there with my son, and I did talk to the person working there and asked her how many people came by, and she said 10 people. And that it comes up when they have the camp kids come and they get lunch on those days. And, but it was very quiet, so it looked, so I just wanted to see if you guys have researched and looked at that.
No, honestly, I think that's a role for the commission.
Commission, you
not
want
the-
us to, flesh that out?
Well, I think it's a use case,
Right.
and I think we're building to the use cases that are defined by the commission. So the commission has asked us for concession building, so if the commission wants to change that, that's good, or if you want to explore other, and that's on here too. I mean, we've explored the possibility of different ways to approach concession, but not from the perspective of whether it's good or not, from the perspective of how we might have to accommodate those different uses in the building plan. So if we were to use a food truck as an example, does Neil have to kind of give some different consideration to that than if he's building a concession facility above? hookups, whatever, I don't know what that, you know. So, yes, I understand your point.
We have heard from a concession operator in the past that this property is not profitable in general. They run it as an option for the town to have, but really it's the Wheat Beach concession is the reason that they keep the Pear Tree Beach concession. So in terms of, I don't think it's wise to eliminate a concession at Pear Tree Beach, but I think your point's a good one, that we should just consider alternatives.
If I could put my commission hat on now, what I've observed is that, like, we're kind of locked in to one concession area at the moment. And just from a business perspective, I would recommend to the commission and Parks and Recs that we should bid that business out annually, and we should bid it out to people who want it, who are going to provide a great level of service and who think they can make money out of it. Or if they don't think they can make money, they're at least giving the town something back in return for something maybe they're getting elsewhere within town. But that's not happening at the moment. So the scenario that's kind of led to is what we were describing. You know, maybe quality of offerings is diminishing. I mean, I'm a hot dog lover. I'd love to, and Pear Tree Beach is my beach. I probably went there between 20 and 25 times last year. I'd love to get a hot dog. I'm not getting hot dogs at Pear Tree Beach. So, you know, simple things like that, you know, so my only point is, I think the commission has to get their head around approaching the concession at Pear Tree, and we could do whatever we want with weed, more from a business perspective, and I think giving the director the leverage to say, okay, annually we're going to bid that out. We're going to bid it out to the highest bidder, and maybe this year it's this type of food. If we want to keep that, but I think keeping it in the way that it is, wearing my commission hat, I think it's kind of like it doesn't work from my perspective.
Some of the history on that is that we did try to go out. I mean, Sue Switek did, and nobody bid in it. And,
well then,
you know,
you
and
close
that
it down
was,
then.
no, I'm just giving you some feedback.
No, I understand.
So as a result, we didn't, you know, he just kept it open because we said, well, if you're doing, you know, it's two both or none. And the reality is there's a lot more volume at Wheat Beach because we have the paddle, we have the playground, we have all these other things going on, the sailing team, the sailing, I mean, so there's tennis. I mean, there's a multitude of amenities that we're offering there that we don't offer at Pear Tree. So that's why I'm like reevaluating if we're not getting money from it, what, you know.
Let me suggest two things. One is I do think my recommendation would be that the commission kind of initiate and kind of take on some minimal study here. Just because it's a facility, it's an amenity, and we're agreeing it's not maybe being run as effectively as we'd like. That's separate. But let's just kind of posit this. If the commission decides that you don't want a concession, okay, so where does that leave us tonight? Are we saying we don't want to have we don't want to build new? We're willing to kind of stick with the existing buildings, eliminate the concession from the existing buildings, bring in a food truck, and that's the option? Or are we saying no concession, but we still like the idea of elevated, we like flexible community space, we won't have a concession up there, but we're still going up? So I don't feel as though, although I'm only one voice here, I don't feel as though that kind of gets us out of the need to have the kind of the responsibility to answer the question, are we going up or are we renovating? Like, I don't know, from my perspective, I don't know how I would make the decision differently if we asked two people to go off, study concessions, and come back to us 2 months from now or 2 weeks from now and say, well, we don't want a concession, or we like concessions and we're going to manage them this way. How does that change how we would make a decision on renovate or going up?
Well, it would allow us to use that concession space for something that we think we might, like programming space. I'm just not saying that's what it is, but it does tell us, you know, allow us to use that space differently.
So you're kind of suggesting?
I'm not saying that's these are things we need to discuss as a commission, and that is why it impacts your number one objective, because we have to figure that out.
I think my 2 cents would be that, you know, if we're improving the site, then I think the concession would be really nice to have. You know, like when you go to the facility, it is nice to have something. I think we can really improve it. I think right now we're limited because he owns a lot of his equipment in there. Mm-hmm. And once we do this project, we will own it. We will be able to grow it if they didn't have that. So I think in my opinion, it's nice to have the concession available. And if we're improving everything around it, I think people will use it more.
By the way, don't misunderstand I'm playing devil's advocate,
Oh, I
so don't
am,
misunderstand.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, but,
Just
yeah.
giving you the other extreme.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to think about in between somehow.
Could I make a comment? I don't think it's a function of quality, it's a function of demand. You know, it's the same concessionaire. Their sales are fine, very little demand at Pear Tree. You go to Pear Tree, you observe it, it's kind of a picnicking type of beach. Most people bring their picnic. My concern is, and let's say we don't have an elevated structure, does it make sense to put in expensive restaurant equipment at grade level for a building that does occasionally flood? To me, it makes no sense. So it's a decision, it's either, and again, this assumes, you know, we're not doing a second story structure. So your decision is either no concession whatsoever, or either the town buys a truck and outfits it and, you know, sells things on the weekend and can pull away in a storm event, or by invitation on the weekend, which, you know, there are a lot more people. During the week, I've gone down, I mean, there are 10 people on the beach, most times 15. There's never going to be a big demand, so it's kind of a weekend demand, and I don't even know then if it's needed, but my thought is consider some sort of food truck arrangement, which again would not be subject to storms because you could drive it away.
And also just comment on the $60,000. If Rob takes all his equipment out of there and we decide the town's gonna put in its own equipment, you're gonna spend that $60,000 in about 3 minutes.
Yep, it's gone.
And you won't even have a fryer between the price of the tables and sinks and everything else. I mean, it's $100,000, $120,000 nut just to get started.
If you do a second story though, with the concession off, then you'd have a fair amount of money to renovate those buildings down as storage and,
Yeah.
and that is a lot more doable.
Except that's hoping that the demand for the concession food will increase, and we don't know that unless we do some sort of market study, I guess. I mean, at present, there does not seem to be much demand.
But it could be, and it's unfortunate that this is very thorny because we don't really know the real rise, that we don't know because
Right, and
the food selections are poor, if the quality of the food isn't very good.
But again, at the two
People don't come,
beaches, the
you know, you
quality
say
is
people
the same.
picnic, but maybe they picnic and bring their lunch because the food's, I mean, we don't know, unfortunately, it's tricky. You know, it's a thorny issue. I will say my company closed its cafeterias upstate at one point and went to food, you know, offered us food trucks. I will just say as experience, A, they're very unreliable. B, it's very management intensive. And C, they are very noisy and stinky. They tend to run on their own engines or their own generators. They are very noisy, so that's something we would have to consider, whether we would want that level of kind of rumbling and noise at a small beach. So I just wanna put that.
It needs to be investigated.
Yeah, it needs to be investigated, I just wanna put that out there. So we'd have to think about citing them probably away from the main sitting area, and they kick off they can kick off a lot of heat.
The only thing I would say there is, I think it would be viable, rather than having to have them run their own generators, to have them hook up to our power, town power. I mean, obviously there's a cost to that, but you know, that, to your point, that would kind of eliminate the, having them run a generator, which would be probably pretty annoying, I think, you know. Cheryl?
Yeah, I have a couple of thought processes going through my brain here. First off, the money that we have to renovate, let's just say $60,000 on the larger building with the concession stand. I don't know, does that really include the equipment that we put inside the building? I understood it was just for the walls and that stuff.
Oh, no, it's everything. It's everything.
Okay, so if we put in desks and built-ins for, say, the police room, that is included in that also?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Well,
Okay, so
I
then,
think it's actually built in. I mean, I don't think bringing in a desk is considered something that can be easily removed, but it's something that would be subject to, I guess, the issues of flooding and the dangers associated with that. so.
Well, if we were to keep the concession stand downstairs, let's just say, and we, the town, were to have the equipment, I think there's other equipment that, other than, that we could buy that would be not as expensive as what they have in there now. Like somebody said, those things that cook hot dogs on rollers instead of a fryer later and frying the hot dog. I don't know whether that's an option or not, but someone had mentioned that to me a couple of times, that they have that at other places, at other beaches and other concession stands around the state. And that would be less expensive than putting in heavy duty, really equipment. And that, I mean, I can see $60,000 if we have to put in, do we own the hood that's in there?
Yes, I believe so.
I thought so, because that will wipe out $60,000 in a second.
Well, I mean, another option might just be to purchase the existing equipment from the current concessionaire. I mean, like it's there, so I think it's probably not, it wouldn't be counted, it's already there, so, I mean, the town is spending our money. Right, but everything's pretty old. But I think we're trying to figure out what are we getting for what we would be spending here.
Also, I would like to say that having the bathrooms and the concession on, if we go with the concession, I think it's important that for the community, it's on the first floor. Having a ramp 134 feet or around the building and up again is a long way for handicapped people to walk. It's a long way for elderly people to walk. And this is a beach that's used by a lot of people that can get right on the beach. So I would prefer that you consider keeping the concession and bathrooms downstairs. I think it's a long way to go upstairs, on a second floor. And I think having that would be, it's a small beach. It's a little beach that we've had, for years, and I can see it still being a small beach and being used by the community and not being as busy as Weed is. Weed has a lot of amenities over there that we just will never have it at Pear Tree. We just don't have the room or the space. So that's where I'm coming from.
Tiara, we had chatted about you kind of talking to you have an extensive peer group of referred to as younger families in town and getting people's senses of concession. We've been told that beach is really liked by families with very young children, and just any information you can share. It's all anecdotal,
Yeah,
of course.
So I just got a small, I just did a very casual Google survey on it, and I'm still waiting for a lot of people to fill it out, but I only got 20 responses right now. My one question right now is, has there been, because I came on April's Parks and Rec, has there been focus groups with the community specifically for Pear Tree and sort of the ideas around it now? Because I'm just thinking about the Corbin project and how that's, like, he's had so many focus groups on it, and I'm just wondering, has there been any in the past?
It was part of the questions for the master plan.
So just from the master plan.
Which tied to sort of the questions and the objectives that came out, but I would not say specific focus groups to things as gnarly as, do we keep a concession or don't we keep a concession?
Right, like all the nitty gritty stuff about it. So.
Is that correct, Dan?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so I did get some information in terms of like the concession stand versus the food truck, and like would you, it was like 40% would buy food from a concession stand, 40% would bring their own food, and 20% would buy from a food truck. So, it just seems like what you said, Lori, is this like a place, is it because of the food at the concession stand, or is this like more a picnic beach, what it's from? That would be really interesting to kind of get into more. And then in terms of like a flexible space to rent out, it was 40% yes, 35% maybe, and 25% no. And this is young families with with toddlers. This is like under 5 years old. you know, these are like families that are gonna be raising their kids on this beach, so, you know, and, so it's, you know, I just want more information from the public, just in terms of like concession stand and flexible space.
Okay, thanks. Mary Louise?
I was gonna ask Neil about the flat roof.
Yes.
Does that make sense in this area? You hear a lot of criticism about schools that were built, the flat roofs and so on.
Right. Well, most of those schools were built in the 50s and 60s, and the technology was not as good as it is now. So I have no reservations at all about a flat roof. One of the things we've been thinking was that it could be a green roof, a planted roof, which is a trend these days. It's ecologically sound and sustainable.
And the purpose of the flat roof was to keep the scale equivalent to the current scale.
Correct.
That's a good idea.
Trying, you know, keep the scale down. Yeah.
Mike?
Yes, please.
It seems to me that we're trying to decide this, A or B, renovate or new, you know, and it really depends on the uses of the buildings. And we've talked about two uses. At length, we've talked about concession. And some people like burgers and some people like hot dogs, you know, I don't know if we're getting anywhere tonight, but we're getting somewhere. But, to me, the other main part is flexible space for community use.
Yes.
No, do we need that? Do we want it at Pear Tree Beach? Do we want it so bad it would cause us to go to 2 stories? All right, that's what I think we need to discuss tonight, because that's more key, I think, than any of these other issues on this chart. And I think we need to hear from the commission.
Guys, just, you're getting a little bit of a sense of kind of what it's been like doing on the committee here,
No,
so
I know.
you're not gonna get up, you're not easily getting off the hook tonight. You may get off the hook, but it's not gonna be easy. These are tough decisions, and, you know, like, and, we've been kind of working through these for 6 months now, so.
Having done some construction in the past, you know, few years on my house, I'm really having a hard time with the number with the bathroom renovations and how that links back to the master plan in terms of updating facilities. Are we really gonna have a significant upgrade to those restrooms with that amount of money?
Just to clarify.
And I'm kinda stuck on that.
Yeah, so, I'm good, thanks for it. So just to clarify, one does not kind of preclude the other, so the notion here would be, we could have, if we were to preserve those restrooms on ground level, it doesn't preclude the possibility of having restrooms at the elevated level. So you could have them in both places, but from a convenience perspective, they would be at the ground level as well. Right? Now, the ones at the ground level, we're limited in terms of how much money we have to spend, so they're not gonna be all that great. But that doesn't mean, once you go up, now, we're not constrained by that 50% rule number now, in the same way that we're building all kinds of stuff, not all kinds of stuff, but, you know, so there's nothing that precludes having restrooms at the upper level. So, yeah.
But I think that's where we're getting stuck. If we want it to stay, for the people who want to just keep it as is, and we have to work with that space and that limited budget, we're not doing a heck of a lot.
You're correct.
You're absolutely correct.
That's
And
it.
that's, I think, what I think all of us need to decide on. Do we really want to significantly improve these facilities or not? I don't, that's where I am. I don't know. And I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to kind of sum it up once again, apologies, but what you'll get for, you know, a renovate option will be marginally improved restrooms. We have to figure out what we're doing with concession, but if we're keeping a concession, it's marginally improved, if not pretty much what you have there, or no concession, and whatever other option then we're looking for. And maybe kind of a deck system that allows kind of to activate some space that currently isn't activated. So, because we're not constrained in terms of the 50% rule as long as it's not connected to the existing buildings. So it doesn't, eliminate the possibility of improving, but we're not, you know, but it's important to know what you're getting and what you're not gonna get.
But that's the renovate only scenario, right? 'Cause
Correct.
there really are three scenarios here. There's a renovate only, there's a start brand new, and then there's this hybrid. And there's some
Yes.
flexibility in the hybrid where you could flip the bathrooms to the other side and move the concession upstairs, and so that, you know, there's a million different options. But it does all start with, we need to know what we want
Yeah.
before we can sort of figure out what the best way to get there is.
Cheryl? By the way, the more we're talking, the more we're letting these guys off the hook, but,
Well, I have another thought process, and it's, do we need flexible space at Pear Tree? Is that something that we should be at in that spot? Because I was thinking as I was at Weed Beach the other day, and I was looking at that area now we might want to call the meadow as of tonight. And that's an open space, and if I'm looking at the FEMA map correctly, it's at an elevation of 14 feet. So if you were to build that flexible space in that area, you'd only have to go up 3 feet to 17 feet. And that space you could build a room over there with a deck looking out over the water. And the junior sailing program is there. And they, at one point, wanted to have some sort of a building with a room in it that they could use. So that could be built over there and eliminate the flexible space for a bigger building at Pear Tree, and use that flexible space at Weed. Just throwing in another concept here. But I don't know if we need the flexible space at Pear Tree. But that's a thought that I'd like to throw out to the commission to see what you think, because you do have the junior sailing program right there, and that would be a program that would be able to use that facility without building them another facility where they are. Just saying.
So comments just from the master plan process, if I remember, the only flexible programmable space in the parks facilities is the paddle hut building. That's the only current flexible space and from a usable standpoint, we've had meetings there in the past. It's a little limited, has benefits for seating to have access out to the PAL area. You know, there's a little small area gathering for small groups. Bigger group, you have a larger table like this fits in there with a limited wall for projection. But that is really the only facility dedicated to the Parks Rec Department for ongoing programmable flexible space, just for perspective. It has been in the master plan of accommodating the junior sailing club at Weed Beach at some point in the future, of having that flexible space to be larger or more accommodating, but not to add a wrench into the mix. But if that's the only facility, you know, the idea was to add more into the greater parks facilities offerings, and that's what spawned having this facility as considering having that programmable space in the future.
But it still could be used for programmable space over at Weed.
I'm not denying that, I'm just saying the
Okay.
current setting is Weeds, the paddle hut is the only current programmable space. The master plan did say there's need for more facilities throughout the offerings of the Parks Department, and Pear could be one, the junior sailing club another, and I think those are the only two that were really brought up in the master plan processes, potentials for those types of spaces.
Well, we also discussed, we also discussed having this flexible space seasonal, not year-round. So it wouldn't have to be heated and it wouldn't have to be air-conditioned, correct? So we
discussed the
threw
possibility of a whole,
that also. So we had talked about that too. So that would be less expensive, and it would only be open for 3-4 months of the year. So there's that option.
Cheryl, Mike wants us to focus right there.
Well, we're talking about
Roman numeral
flexible
one.
space.
Roman numeral one. And I'd like to hear from the commission.
Yeah, I mean, you probably watched our meetings, I assume, and heard the discussion. I mean, where are you thinking you're coming out?
I'll jump in. my private property, I would build this double story, no problem. I mean, there's no reason why you wouldn't wanna take advantage of this. There's no reason why you wouldn't wanna have social space, but it's not, and it has to reflect the views of the town. And I understand from Pam and the department's view that they wanna have programmable space. But that's not what I'm hearing from the town, and that's not what I'm reading from the plan. So, my hesitation is that we're losing that sort of tranquility and calmness and all the things everybody keeps talking about, which I see when I go down there. Both sides have merit, but it seems like to reflect what the community wants is to stay with a single story space. Again, I'm trying to have a more global view here, not just my own personal perspective, but that's what I'm hearing very consistently. I would go with renovate. Amy?
I think it's a really pretty building, and I like the idea. I was really thrilled about the platform space for eating. I thought that looked great. I do believe that if there's a demand, then we should supply it, and I'm not sure that the demand for the concession stand, that I've heard enough that there's a demand there, it makes me a little worried. And I guess if I could get more information, which we don't really have time for, I guess I would like to hear about if we run out of communal space for our programs, or if, do you have to turn people away?
Well, I think the idea behind this flexible space is for the community to enjoy it. It's not necessarily just for park and rec programming. This is like people can go in and they have a beautiful view, they can plug in, they can have a cup of coffee, they can.
There's no doubt they'd have that with this design.
Right,
It's a great
that's what
design.
it's about.
So would they have, but can they also have the beautiful view from the platform?
Yes,
Or,
yeah, it's for the community.
so that's what I'm wrestling with.
It's for the community.
You
It
know?
is in a perfect, beautiful spot for the community to go up and sit and.
Wait, you're asking about the platform that Neil showed in the renovate option?
Yeah, I think that answers that question too, so I'm really torn. I can see why you all have been debating it, and.
It's not simple, it's not an easy answer.
Yeah, it's not.
Well, it kinda is, do you want a concession or not? That's, to my mind, that's what drives it. You want a concession, you need to go up, if you don't, then you don't really have
But
to.
we still
I also
have a
thought-
concession
I also
stand,
thought it
though.
was a really important thing that the gazebo be ADA accessible, and so I like the decking plan. That does that.
So just to get back to you on that, I'm confused because I thought if we renovate, as in Plan A, we will still have a concession stand. Is that wrong?
We don't have the money to.
necessarily.
It's
Not really.
So, but we will have what we have, which is serving 10 people a summer.
Yeah, I think that's
people
still
a day.
around.
We could.
10 people a day.
Just
We
leave it
have what we
alone.
have, and we don't have an upgrade, and one of the mandates is that we're gonna upgrade these facilities.
Yeah, look, just a reminder.
Okay, so we don't
right.
get an upgraded concession stand at
Guys,
all. It's
just a
only-
reminder, we're going through this exercise because the commission asked for these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a very efficient town, so the commission went through a process, the commission voted, it was taken very seriously, the selectmen then said, okay, let's fire up a building committee, and so here we are, and at the time, there was a thought that a concession was desirable. So, now I also kind of acknowledge, there was a master plan, the master plan was done, some nebulous things in that master plan, like concession and go up and stuff like that, which have gotten translated, and we've done a really good job of taking those nebulous things and like translating them into real things. But you guys have to ask yourself the question now, because what we're asking you to ask is, like, okay, let's acknowledge it was nebulous, and maybe we really don't want those things. Because at the time you thought you did.
It was impossible for us to have this discussion without the enormous amount of work that you guys have done, so we're really grateful. It's not putting the cart ahead of the horse here. We needed you to do this work to have this discussion, so it's not a waste of time.
No, but with all due respect, I think, Erica, none of this work was necessary to kind of determine whether or not the commission voted on a new elevated concession building. At the time, and look, respectfully, everybody had to understand that there was a cost to building a new building and going up and building a new concession facility. You may not have known whether it was X or Y, but there was a cost and there was an exercise and there was an effort. So, we just need to be mindful now. We're at a point, we've hired folks, you know, we're stopped. And if we can't get a decision, we're stopped. So we can't make any more progress until we get a decision. And in my role, I'm not willing to have, I mean, we're co-chairs here, so Randy may have a different opinion, but I'm not willing to have the committee decide these things. That's not the role of the building
No,
committee.
that's fair, but I think what I'm hearing is the master plan set out objectives. If we had a perfect world here and we could accomplish all these things, everybody would be great. But as you've gotten into the details and done the hard work and engaged our professionals and heard from the community, what we're realizing is to accomplish these things a way that might have been envisioned in a master plan is extraordinarily difficult because of the complexities of the site. And that it may come down to trade-offs. So yes, in an ideal world, we would have a great concession, we would have this, but now that the commission is getting all of this detail about the real challenges, I think they're saying we really have to think about whether we have to make some trade-offs here.
I think we're miscommunicating here. There's nothing complicated and difficult about building this.
Sure there is.
No, I mean, there's two different ways to do it. I mean, we can kind of surround the existing building, and I think we're exploring kind of what that would mean. Or we can tear down the existing buildings and go up. So from a construction perspective, I don't think there's anything that we've learned that kind of suggests, I just don't want to leave that impression. There's nothing, I think, and Neil, please correct me here, that the building committee has learned to suggest that this is a particularly kind of outsized, complex exercise as compared to doing this, you know, somewhere else. I don't think that's the case.
No.
Just to help, just thinking about it, I mean, you know, we've heard from members of the community throughout the community, not just neighbors. I haven't yet to receive one letter that suggests that they are in favor of building a new facility or an elevated space. Everybody points to the tranquil, natural nature of the beach. They talk about Weed being a much more developed beach. I think Cheryl made a very good point. I mean, I don't think you can do two projects and look at them totally separately. I mean, the Meadows would present a great location, I think, for flexible space. That being said, rental and event space was not high on the survey, period. But let's say you were to do flexible space at Weed, you would have to make your case to the RTM about why you need this flexible space. Is there a demand for it? How are you gonna use it? Is it seasonal? Is it year-round? If it's year-round, what are the costs associated with it? You know, you've gotta really do some real thinking about this. You can't just say we want flexible space and that's it. You've gotta define, how is it gonna be used? You know, and what are all the costs associated with it?
To get back to your point, Erica, about the public that we're hearing from, I mean, having done Weed Beach and playground and all these things, to be honest with you, the public we hear about is always the negative. I mean, whether it would be dogs or anything, we never hear it the other side.
Right.
So to be fair, and the people that do wanna speak sometimes are afraid to speak because of the others, you know, and I just want people to keep that in their head, that as we're building this, that we have to think of the whole community. And I know that there are people here that are not neighbors that are commenting, but, you know, that's also, we do have another side, I think, that's not coming out, and to think about it. And also, they might not know to advocate for this because they don't know about the potential yet. And that happened a lot with Weed Beach. Like, people were like, we don't want the playground's gonna cost this money, it's all this stuff, and very negative, even the building itself. And then now, you know, we build it, and now it's what realtors take, you know, it's a jewel of town, and I know it serves a different constituency, I get it, and that, you know, there's a lot of amenities there, but I feel like this is also an opportunity. It might not be, we might not need to do everything that we're envisioning, but we should do as much as we can at this point in time. And I don't want us to just get nervous about, you know, all these different things, but I do want us to be thoughtful about what we're doing here, which is why I'm questioning about the use of, you know, the concession and all these other things, because I think it's gonna have an impact in the future, because we might find that people might have been changing the way they're gonna be bringing food. It could be like Uber Eats, it could be food trucks, it could be, people are so nutritionally conscious that they're not even comfortable having food, you know, I mean, there's just all these options. So that's why I'm, in my head, I'm thinking about these things. But I do like that, you know, the new design that Neil put together. I do, the two-story does not really offend me as much as, you know, because of the way that, you know, you described it with the existing, the pitch of that roof. I'm just debating whether, you know, what we're gonna put up there. If it is gonna be a concession, if it's just gonna be flexible space. And I don't also think of flexible space as rental space either. I think it's an opportunity for people to enjoy that space up there, that, you know, it doesn't have to be rented for you to enjoy it. It's there. It's not gonna be like the paddle hut, I think. It's gonna be more open to indoor, outdoor use.
Well, so you have to tell us, I mean, is it
That's-
gonna be locked at times, or is it gonna be open to the public at all times? Because that'll make a difference the way
I
we
mean,
furnish
I think when we
it.
looked at it, I mean, we saw this as an opportunity for that beach to, like, I think there's more going on, environment, ecologically significant there with the wetlands right there. We saw this as a good space for kids to come down and learn about the sounds, because we doesn't have the same, I mean, you know, you see kids all the time looking for crabs, learning a lot more about the sound, I think, on that side of the beach, especially, I'm gonna call it the West Beach, because I know that's how you refer to it, the back beach, Cheryl likes to call it. But I just think there are a lot of opportunities there, and I think, you know, there could be groups coming down, I mean, kids, you know, like, I know that, we just got an email that the 7th graders are gonna be going down to Pear Tree to do some team building exercises down there. So these are, you know, places that if the day's a little off or there's just a little sprinkle of rain, the group of kids can go in there and possibly, you know, wait out a small, you know, rain drizzle or something and continue on with what they're doing. But now they don't have that ability to. All you have is that gazebo, which honestly, if you go to use that gazebo, I mean, I've been there, you see someone in there, you don't even wanna walk in there. So it becomes like a personal gazebo for whoever gets there first. And so that's not a lot of space for people to use. So that's something to consider, you know, for the future. So I mean, to be honest with you, I don't wanna spend money that doesn't need to be spent, but I also wanna make it usable for town residents. And if that being said, I'm kind of leaning towards this two-story with the, you know, some kind of flexible space up there. I'm just not sure about, you know, how the concession will go in the future. But, you know, I think that if we keep the roof line sympathetic, I mean, I sat in the gazebo and looked out across that roof, and it wasn't a lot of space. And if you look at this, I mean, I think these aerials are really telling for me. The seaweed beach, it's very much developed. And even Pear Tree right here, it's not, you know, it's developed, but not to the degree, and you're not gonna change that footprint that much, right?
Right.
So that's, you know, and I actually, you know, I looked at how many parking spaces you said there were. I was like, oh my God, I just never realized that there were so many parking spaces at Pear Tree, that we took away parking spots at Wheat Beach in order to get some of the amenities in. So, I mean, I think there's opportunity there too for us. But I just hope that, you know, that gives you better, I'm just, you know,
That's
I mean,
helpful.
that's my personal opinion, just having done Wheat Beach and
Yeah.
having that perspective, that you're gonna get all the negative
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff.
very
But
helpful.
we also do have to keep in mind and, you know, work with, you know, our neighbors.
Yeah.
And to have them understand and have, you know, you guys have been very good about communicating, having the meetings open and having them see, you know, the drawings that Neil puts together and the models. I think that helps a lot, so that people don't get, you know, because honestly, the existing, you know, cinder block structure is very, I mean, we had to deal with that at Wheat Beach too, and it needs definitely a facelift, a fix, and the bathrooms need to be done. I went into the bathroom and I literally went in and out in 5 seconds, because they're just not where they need to be. So if you guys decide you will do a flip or you do the concession thing, that might be another place that if you can improve those bathrooms at grade, I'd like to see that happen too. So, anyway.
I like the way you made it more accessible to handicapped people, so that you can access the beach if you can walk. If you can't walk and you're in a wheelchair, you're really stuck both, you know, there. And tying the whole area together with the gazebo and the way you did it, I think was very effective.
Is that a vote to be able to go up or not?
Pardon?
Is that a vote to be able to put a second story on or not?
I think, yeah, yes.
Fair enough.
I mean, I'm hearing, you know, what might be a small minority of the public saying that they're against it. You know, as I think Susan makes a great point that people aren't gonna come down here and cheer for this project. With that being said, I don't find the proposed structure to be offensive. I don't think it's so out of scale with relative to what's there now. You know, I'm concerned about the bathroom situation, as I said earlier. But if we can make them usable and not, you know, a place that you wanna run in and out of in 5 seconds, maybe that would, we have enough money to do that. I guess I'm for going forward with it. Going up.
Am I allowed to say something?
No. No, Mike, of course.
Just in listening to everything, it occurs to me that you've got this great opportunity. And this opportunity comes along maybe once in 50 years or 100 years. You've got a crappy old bathhouse that you're gonna not be able to spend a lot of money on to renovate. So you're essentially gonna end up with the same thing you have now with a coat of paint on it. And unless, you know, you decide to take it down and build a new structure that's up at the elevated level that will give you beautiful new bathrooms. And that doesn't mean fancy and expensive, but clean and airy and light. And whether you do a concession or no concessions, you have even the lifeguard stands up there, the first aid station's up there, everything is on this beautiful elevated deck. And now it's out of the flood zone, so you don't have to worry about flooding and repairs whenever there's a major storm event. It's all up above that. So your maintenance long-term is going to be lower. Plus it provides much better views of the beauty of the site because you're up a couple feet. So just in thinking about this and listening to everyone's comments tonight, it just seems like this is an opportunity that you'll get once every 50 years or every 100 years. And you have the mandate by this committee earlier on to go ahead and do this. And now it seems a shame not for you to move forward with a really nice structure. So
Don't you have a strong financial interest in that, though?
No, my feeling.
No, I don't even answer that, Neil. Let's move on. That's just once again, that's inappropriate, and we're not answering that. And there's no more public comment at this stage.
And it's rude.
So let's move on.
I'm in full support of going new. I just feel like it's an incredible opportunity to build something that the whole community can use. It creates multiple gathering spots on the beach, from like the covered deck to the open deck to the flexible space to still having the gazebo to a possible viewing point. It just creates even more of a point of pride for the community, and I think that it doesn't, you know, it's not obstructing the view, and I love the flat roof. I'm in full support. I'm really excited for it.
Can I say one more thing? I feel like our top mandate was sort of for in general for the master plan is like open spaces, natural spaces, and I feel like putting in I see the beauty, and I love the design, I really do, I love the design, and I think it's unobtrusive and as natural as possible, but this gets away from that mandate, it gets away from the natural space. You're putting a 2-story structure in a point of land, and I just think, for as much as we've heard about people wanting to keep things modest, this just goes strongly against it. I think people will end up using it, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like it's not what we were asked to do, so I just wanna add that back.
I I just feel like it goes back to if we're updating it and giving the existing structures a facelift, it's just gonna be barely anything.
May I put my commission hat on? Okay, so a few things. So I have a few points here, and I'll try not to ramble on for hours, but I'm going to refer back so I don't forget some of the points. So first off, many of you know I'm a new resident in town, relatively new. We're going on 2 years here in town. And when my wife and I made a decision to move, we could have moved anywhere on the planet. You know, we're blessed and we had the ability to move wherever we wanted to. And you know, certainly one consideration is we have grandchildren here. But it really wasn't a key consideration because, you know, we can kind of get in a car and go, you know, kind of see them when we want to. So what were the considerations? And I'm hoping the realtors are listening to this. Because we're an outlier, you know, as people are moving out of towns like this, we moved into it. And it seemed to us, yeah, beautiful natural features, you know, we love the beaches, great parks, and of course, wonderful school system and just, you know, great services. But what really struck us was it looked as though this was a town that had the spirit of really continuing to work to improve the quality of life for folks who live here. And that wasn't the experience where we came from. We came from Westchester, a town in Westchester where, you know, taxes were going up, property values were going down, and there was a fear of investing for various different reasons, which I think kind of created a scenario where those towns were kind of deteriorating. So that was a key consideration. You know, like I said, we must have looked at 50 homes, you know, during our search throughout Fairfield County. I mean, the other consideration was this kind of notion that I was shocked by of transparency of the processes that exist within this town, and we're seeing it kind of, you know, like kind of in kind of full, you know, the full spirit of it here. So there's something special here, and I thought, you know, you raised the Corbin project, and I don't think it's a direct kind of comparison here, but you know. You can imagine somebody looking at that project, you know, a private developer, and saying, you know what, there's too much retail space already in these towns. There's too many apartments. You know, they're building a big mall up the road here. Let's get out of this thing and let's go somewhere else. And I think, I don't know David, you know, at all really, but it seems to me like it was kind of a, you know, doubling down on the community. It's a bet on the community that this is an improvement. This is a community that has a spirit of, you know, continuing to improve itself. And we have folks leading the community who I think are kind of reinforcing that for us, and they've charged us to kind of take a look at this. That was one element. You know, so that's kind of the why Darien for us. So now on to Pear Tree Beach. So the other, you know, Pear Tree Beach, that's our beach. Our beach meaning that's where I go. I probably, you know, we're new in town, as I said. When we were looking for homes, you know, we were initially looking around Sunswick area and stuff, you know, down to Delafield, and you know, after I looked at every single house, regardless of what season it was, I drove my car. Well, I did it in the off season since I didn't have a parking pass, but I would drive over to the beach and I'd sit out on the beach and think to myself, Christ, you know, one day maybe I'll live here and I'll be able to kind of sit out here and benefit from this. And so it is our beach. I mean, the Weed and Pear Tree are beautiful beaches, but we've kind of chosen to go to Pear Tree, you know, and there are times when I have to arm wrestle Cheryl for the, you know, the couple of trees that we have in the shade, but you know, we love it, and it is intimate, and I appreciate it. And the last thing in the world that I would ever want to do is do anything to harm Pear Tree. And I think we're working very hard. You know, of course, it's in the eye of the beholder, and everybody has a different kind of take on what's good and what's not. But you know, I have a personal commitment to it. You know, we have gotten a fair bit of you know, feedback from the community. And by the way, when I got involved in this, and I realized I'd have to probably explain a lot of what I was thinking about. I never thought I'd have to explain my use of the term neighbors, but apparently my use of the term neighbors has offended some folks in town. And I just want to go on record and say I'm using the term neighbors in the largest possible definition, meaning I'm considering 22,000 people neighbors. So when I use the term neighbor, I'm not talking about somebody who's in walking distance to the beach. I've used it in the spirit of 22,000 folks who we're all part of this one single community. And I go back to the point, Susan, that you made. One of the things I'm struggling with, because it's a wonderful process and it's a transparent process, and you know, it's like, you know, it's just, you know, it's, you know, it's, you know, it's like, it's, to paraphrase Otto von Bismarck, it's kind of like watching sausage being made, right? I mean, you don't, you know, it's like watching sausage and laws being made. You'd rather not, because you know you lose respect for both. And, watching this process of a building committee is kind of, it's raucous, there's disagreements, but it's all out there. And everybody has a chance to see what we're doing here. But the problem I have, and this is my first foray into community kind of activities in this regard, the problem I'm having is what you've touched on. We know, and I don't question the motivation for anybody who isn't in favor of what we're doing here, but we know there's a large segment of the population that for one reason or another would probably love this, I'm guessing. Out of 22,000 people, a few people have to love this, but we're not hearing from those folks, and I don't know how to kind of fix that issue. And it goes back to your point that we're getting a lot of feedback, but I think once again, it seems to me that the feedback we get will tend to be the impassioned kind of feedback against something as opposed to the impassioned feedback for it. I'm not an urban planner, I'm not somebody who's done a lot of this stuff before, but my sense is I think that's, so we're taking that feedback to heart, but I'm not taking it at this stage as kind of representative of the sense of the community. I'm sorry, unless somebody wants to show me something different, I don't take it as a representative sense of the community. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I think it's, we have a chance to do something, that very few people get the opportunity to do. I like the idea and the concept of activating space. I think, like the experience at Pear Tree, from my perspective, is kind of limited in terms of the dimensions. It's true, people go to be on the beach, people go to be in the sand, people go to be on the sun. But I think if people have the opportunity to sit on a deck and have a drink, or sit in a space that's maybe has a beautiful breeze blowing through it without having to get blasted by the sun, I think that's improving the experience. And I thought that was the sense of what the commission kind of entertained when you guys made that an objective. So having said all of that and my kind of preamble here, I'm in favor of it. I think what we have here, and I would ask the commission to kind of basically say, go ahead, continue on. I think if there's a little bit of a hang up on the concession thing, I think we could probably find a way to proceed with like other elements of this kind of going upwards while the commission kind of explores the issue of concession. But I think it's an opportunity to improve what's there. I think it can be improved. I think it could benefit from improvement. Like I said, I'm not questioning the motivation of folks who are coming out against it. That beach has been there for a lot longer than any of us have been in this room. We're working with experts from Weston and Sampson. We're working with experts from the state to understand how we continue to preserve that beach and do no harm to it. So anyway, that was what my commission had on it. So that's my take on it. I vote to proceed with it.
Has anybody asked the people who use the paddle hut, would they like to be using that space over there? Like, it's a natural extension of people we could be canvassing. I haven't heard from any of those people. We've had the paddle hut now, it was been an unexpected surprise. It's been in a positive way. It's been lovely to have that space. It rents out consistently. But have any of those people been canvassed to say, like, if you had this alternative, would you want it? Oh, we haven't done that.
Yeah, I've just heard from probably 25, 30 families that renting out the paddle hut, they would love to rent it out for birthday parties and private events, but that they feel like they don't need all the paddle courts, and that having something with an ocean view would be amazing. So that's what I've heard, just a small sample.
Can we do the building, and is there a plan for that wonderful deck with the new building? No, there's just, it's either or.
Yes.
No,
yes.
It's not either or. It could be both.
It could be both.
It could be both, because I really love the deck.
Yeah, so do we.
So do we.
Around the gazebo.
Right. Around the gazebo, yeah. I really love that, and I think it offers really nice outdoor viewing
And lots of
eating
little
and-
spaces.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. So they're not mutually exclusive. Okay, thank you.
In fact, there's one, you had talked about conceptualizing one where you tie
one
it
with the
all in
radius.
to that
Yes.
second floor.
Okay. Right. Right.
All right, I gotta say 2 words, a couple words, because I can't be as verbose as Mike is. I'm not new to town, I've been here my entire life. I played on that beach when there were a bunch of old ramshackle lockers that took up much more space than the existing footprint of what's there. I don't pretend that I'm there all the time now. I stop in because of my involvement here to see what's going on from time to time, but I don't use it. The bulk of what Neil's come up with as far as looking at it from a distance it kind of ties in with the hump that's the gazebo. And when you kind of look at that from the road, or from maybe over by the boat club, or even over where the picnic area is, it doesn't really increase the bulk of what you're seeing. It's not gonna disturb anybody's view more than what they have now. It kind of blends in to the features of the land. And I think you have to give us the go-ahead to go ahead and invest and let Neil go ahead forward with a 2-story operation. You don't have to decide right now whether you want the snack bar, concession stand up there. You don't have to decide how big the space is, the community space, the flexible space is gonna be up there at this stage of the game. But we have to let him go so that, you know, we can get started here. Else you're gonna decide that you don't wanna go up, and we're gonna put mustard on the pig or whatever it is.
So wait a minute,
That's the hot dogs.
who said you weren't verbose?
That's the most verbose I've ever heard.
You gotta tell us what you wanna do.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. This has been a really great, open and honest discussion. And Mike, despite what you think, I think this is a difficult process. I think there's hard decisions to be made.
Oh, no, I know it's a difficult process.
So.
Not difficult to build, but the process is difficult.
The process and considering all the alternatives and the constituents and understanding how impassioned many people are about the property, which is wonderful. I guess about this community, and people care about the property.
I had black hair when it started.
And that's fantastic. I do think it's not an opportunity that we get to repeat. We have to make the decisions now. Coming back 5 years or even 10 years might not be an opportunity. The community could be onto other projects or whatever. So we've been charged with doing something now. So it doesn't seem we should kick the can down the road. I think we need to do the process respectfully of the property, to minimize the impact, and the view planes are important to people. I do think when people think about going to the beach, that means different things for different people. Some people it's sitting right down there in the sand and digging or whatever. But other people going to the beach really means going to the water. There are people who don't like the sand. I'm not one of them, but there are people who don't like the sand. There are people who don't like to be or cannot be for health reasons in the sun, but want to be at the water. I know personally this weekend I wanted to get out of the sun. I went and sat in the open section of weed because I needed to be out of the sun for a while. So I think we have to think that just being at the beach isn't just toes in the sand and providing, just, that I meant, the amenities is the opportunity for people to get at the water because we're a waterfront community. And it seems that sadly, working with the existing building we have probably will not accomplish that. I think as a commission, we need to do our homework and decide how we wanna proceed on the idea of keeping a concession or not. And I also think we need to put better definition around the flexible community space and how that might play out. Some of the concerns I've heard and taken to heart is that the neighbors, and I literally mean the neighbors of the property, don't have a good understanding what that would mean. Are there going to be loud parties allowed till 10 o'clock at night? Is the property supervised when it's rented out? What would the maximum be? And I think we all we feel like we know that because we know the park's rules, and we know when you rent Weed Beach out, you pay $25 an hour for the attendant, but I don't think we've done a good job articulating that to people so they understand, how they would be impacted, or more importantly, that we make them feel comfortable that they won't be impacted. So I think that's work we need to do and didn't do well enough. So, but with that, I think that we should proceed to develop the building that we really want for this community. So, are we ready to?
Yeah,
I just want to know if they want to, Cheryl.
Yeah, I just want to note one thing. There's a couple of plans that you've seen tonight. And I'm hearing that you all kind of like the last plan that we talked about, where you have the big deck around the gazebo. If we do that, when you are considering a two-story building, do you want to have an elevator in there? Or do you want to have a ramp going around to get to the second story somehow? Or do you want to connect the, what was I gonna say, the gazebo area to the second story? That needs to be.
We don't have to vote on that
Well,
tonight, right?
Well,
I think
we have,
that
we
to-
have 10 items.
We do, I mean, to understand where we're going and how this is going to
What
look.
you're asking is on the list of,
Yeah,
on the 10 items.
it's kind of sort of on this list of items that, you know, I'm very confused. Okay, you want the two-story building.
I think we can move through these other ones pretty quickly.
Now what, you know? I mean, do you want an elevator? Or do you want to wrap the
I think we should pursue, I think for some reason we sort of tossed the elevator concept out early, I'm not sure why that happened, I haven't been in all the building committee meetings, but I think that
I
absolutely
know this
should
is,
be
and all kidding aside, I know this is difficult, but once again, we've got these guys lined up, and we don't intend to come back and kind of go through this, you know, next meeting and next meeting. So, you know, we're trying to kind of make a breakthrough here, and I think, it sounds like, and I think it would be helpful if you guys voted, so we could take that back with us, but it sounds like, not to put the cart before the horse, we've said yes on the first item here, Roman numeral 1. We've said yes to the second item, Roman numeral 2. It sounds like we're saying yes to the third item, where maybe you guys are asking, you're asking the commission, directing the commission to create more definition around the use of the flexible community space. And that's fine, because then that can inform Neil as he goes forward. And I think he's got enough with the first two items and an understanding that there'll be a third item to kind of progress now. And if that means, you know, there's some additional work, I think that's fine. The question on 4 is similar. I mean, you know, is it enclosed? So, you know, one option would be you can just have it roofed in with some columns and you get breezes blowing through it. But that makes it a little bit more difficult if you want to do stuff off season or extended season. I'm getting the sense like we're saying, recognizing, albeit that you've got to put more definition around the use, that we're really saying enclosed for that. Now, if you're not saying that, let's say it. I mean, let's help us to understand that. I'm not trying to lead the witness here or put words in.
Well, it isn't closed because you have those garage doors that you were talking about. Right?
Well, that's something, we don't have those yet. You have to tell us you want that.
That's considered enclosed, right?
Yes.
That was just an idea.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying that would be considered enclosed.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to kind of let it open up, but also close it down. So this way, like maybe in October, if somebody wants to throw, if you want to have a lecture down there on Seashore or something like that, you can close it down and you have some, and that leads to the next item, which is heating. I mean, I don't think we're recommending that it needs to be air conditioning. You know, you've got wonderful breezes, but you know, if you want to entertain the concept of an extended season, you know, for use of that, then you know you probably need some heating in there. And once again, I'm not trying to answer these questions for you. I'm just trying to facilitate having this meeting end before midnight.
But I don't know that we can get through
We
all
need
those decision points tonight.
Okay.
So what?
But can we have a decision on the elevated structure?
I thought that's
We already
what we were
did.
about
I
to
think
do.
we can do that.
Maybe we didn't put our hands up, but I was gonna ask for a motion.
But should we do 4? Do you need 4?
I'm asking the question as a commission member, what's preventing us from answering 4?
I mean, we should be able to answer 4, right?
I thought we just said yes.
I think we
No.
just said,
No, we said yes to the second story, not to, he's saying there's a.
Enclosed?
These are questions that we
Yeah,
need to
he's
The
putting.
flexible space would be enclosed.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're saying, okay, so the next one is, you know, do you want it to be heated? If you're not prepared to say it needs to be heated, that's a question we can come back.
But
we can come back
when you're
on.
enclosed, it's kind of open if you have those doors open that
Right.
you're
Yeah.
thinking about.
Right.
Well, you have the ability, there'll be windows, there'll be
It
doors,
could
so.
spill out, the people can spill out into the deck.
Enclosed is more from the perspective of in the off-season, the ability to enclose it, not that it's hard and fast enclosed. You follow my point?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Got it, no, thank you.
But those doors could enclose it, but you still might not heat it.
But I'm confused, if it's rental, how is it gonna be open?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you keep talking about open space.
Well, first, yeah, okay, so let me, so first off, I think what the commission is agreeing on, which, you know, we've asked, in the past the committee has asked, is come back with clear definition around the uses for that space and kind of the timing of those uses. One of the things we talked about as an example is maybe limiting rental, that's for these guys to decide, limiting rental till the off-season, so that they wouldn't be rented during the summer season. So during the summer season, I guess, I can envision a space that, you know, like, when the lifeguard leaves at night, they close the doors, they pull the thing down, they lock it up. Lifeguard comes in the morning, they open it. Once again, I'm not trying to lead the witness here in terms of programming,
We
but
did that after the fact with the paddle hut, just so you
Yeah.
know. We built everything and then we decided how that hut was gonna be built after. So
And-
that wasn't decided before we built it, just.
Got it, that's a great
so,
point.
Yeah.
You know, it.
Wasn't even air conditioned
It
until
wasn't,
later.
I mean, yeah,
And
we
it's
did
evolved,
everything later.
right? It's-
So it gave us some flexibility in terms of what we thought our needs would be, and what the director then came back to us and said, this is what we think. And
How about
we-
if we, yeah, that's a great point. How
we
about if we
don't have to
agree on
make a
this?
decision.
So maybe we should just go through, vote on one, just go
Yeah.
through and get
Yes,
as
exactly.
far as we can get.
Yeah, I
And
just
if
think we
there's
just need to
things
make
that
sure
the
everybody
commission
understands what
just
the,
feels
what
that they
the,
just need, and people may just feel they need to sleep on it, so to speak, and rule about it and reflect, so,
Okay.
on certain points, so.
Before we do that, then, I'm just gonna do a quick explanation and then move to what these items are. So we just talked about heating, that's a use, if you guys feel as though you have to defer that and come back to that.
Can we just start, I just wanna start at one and
Just vote.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
that's fine,
move over. Okay,
perfect,
okay.
go for it.
So, with regard to the commission objective Roman numeral 1, I believe what I'm hearing is that the preference is to go to the new elevated structure ADA compliant? Yes, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
which is,
not for me.
Are we?
Do you wanna take a vote on it, or?
what would, be- oh, you're right, I misspoke.
I don't know how we
No,
should do it.
I misspoke.
I'm asking.
I believe what I'm hearing is that what we want to vote on is whether we want to proceed with the new elevated structure, which is Roman numeral 1.
So I think you wanna ask for a motion.
So I would ask for a motion for that. Mary Louise, and a second? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? So then we go into Roman numeral 2, which would be to include upper level deck for viewing and dining.
Yeah, in fact, you could even word it as the initial commission objective, which is above, if you wanted to.
Which is 2.
The
Okay.
addition of the outdoor.
Of the addition of commission, I'm sorry.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Should I, now that I've voted against this, should I abstain from the rest of the voting, or should I continue to vote? Yeah, vote, yeah.
Yeah, because she'll let you put that opinions based on where this is going, and that's fine.
Okay, okay, so then it would vote for sorry, just confusing those in either order. So regarding commission objective 2, which is addition outdoor dining and deck, with it going on with the building new, it would be the inclusion of the upper level deck for viewing and dining. Okay, or do we wanna do that and the flexible community space together? 2 and 3?
Mhm.
Sure, yes.
Sure,
Yes.
okay,
So you wanna invite a motion?
so I'll invite a motion.
Pear and Sarah?
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? And opposed? And then that brings us up to the enclosed elevated. So how is that different?
Well, one is just, one is elevated, and then the other is the ability to have that enclosed as well.
Closed, okay.
Motion to.
But enclosed can be, I mean, that's still a design element.
The ability to enclose, yeah, so once again,
As opposed to just an open air, for instance, like at Weed, where it's just,
Yeah,
Yes.
open air pavilion kind of.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not closed, okay.
really referring to the kind of extended season.
See halfway
use.
between that passageway at Weed and what you
Okay.
have in the paddle hut, so.
Okay. Okay, so a motion on that? Mary Louise, second? Sarah? Okay, all in favor? And then concession facilities, I'm feeling
So we're
like.
bypassing
No, no, you want
the heated one.
Oh, with the heating, okay, sorry, I'm sorry.
It's a small detail, but it's there. And
It is, but again, do we feel we wanna do it or what, do people want it?
we could wait on that.
I think we should wait on it.
Yeah, fair enough.
We made this.
It goes back to you guys kind of exploring the uses
Your
once again.
uses, how we wanna
We
present it to
could
the
also
community.
potentially, say, put in the systems and then add later, so
Yes.
you could do an in-between.
It takes up real estate in the design.
Yeah, so you
So
need to
we
put it
can
in the
plan
design
for it.
anyway,
It needs to.
Well,
because
it
it
does
would
sound
be
like
silly not to.
there's an agreement that there's more work that needs to be done on the use, right?
I think
That's
so.
to your point about kind of status, like just giving the community a bit more understanding.
There was just gonna say too, if you're going to build the flexible space, you
Right.
wanna be able to use it off season.
Yeah, you
Give it
don't
to the
plan for that,
residents
Right.
off
No.
summer long,
Yeah.
and then off
It'll be
season,
the same
there's nobody
space,
using that
so
for
deal or
door.
not.
Yeah. So, okay, let's,
Do you have to run into the restroom issue? You gotta know allow the restrooms, I'm not, I'm just saying,
No, I think that we would
just
be
use
on
it
part of it as is.
as is without any facility.
I think we're comfortable, I think Neil's, once again, part of this is to kind of provide Neil with, I think you're saying you're comfortable at the moment
I think you
with
should
some further
explore that.
discussion around it.
You can always put
Further.
it in a mini split or something, and
Yeah,
that takes up a
exactly.
very,
Right.
that takes up no real estate, and it's
Right.
on demand, and if
Yeah.
that room doesn't have water, it could go on when you need it, you don't need to have it running continuously.
It's not a detail at the same level as the other details.
Right.
There are
But-
elements.
Okay, so we're passing on that.
So we're gonna pass on that, and I think we need to do more homework around the concession.
Okay. So this brings us to the point that Cheryl was raising about kind of the integration of this facility to the gazebo. So the ability to kind of activate that space and move between the elevated facility and the gazebo as opposed to kind of at the moment, they're standalone facilities.
So is that the
That's kind of the ramps, the concept of the ramp structure.
That's the one where you did the drawing with all the round, and you said the bleachers.
Yeah.
I think that was good.
Well, that would be actually 8, the expanded decks off the gazebo.
Which one is it? I'm sorry.
7 is really just, you wanna integrate the gazebo via
Oh.
ramps and stairs into the
Oh,
rest of
okay,
the.
so it's really
layout.
7 and 8 kind of together?
Is it 7
Yeah.
or 8?
You can integrate the gazebo via a ramp, but not have, deck areas around it. So 8 would, I think, be the expanded deck areas around it.
Yeah.
That very last slide I showed.
Yeah, right now we have a gazebo, and the gazebo has a certain footprint associated with it. What Neil has kind of presented to the committee is kind of building off of that and extending kind of the use of the gazebo beyond the current footprint. So you can kind of walk from the gazebo to some additional decking, and kind of just have the benefit of activating some additional space that today is rock outcroppings.
So that would be the second to
cantilever over
last.
the water.
Or over the
Yes.
rock outcroppings,
Yeah.
yeah. So two different things, not to split hairs here, but one is just getting from the gazebo to the building, and the other is, like getting kind of additional space around the gazebo.
Do we wanna vote on those together, or do they need to be split?
It depends on what people think, I'm fine with it together, but. if
I'm
people-
good with them together.
Together.
Likewise.
Everybody's good voting on those together? Okay. Yep. And a
Is
motion?
it the same as the viewing deck you just said, is that what you're?
I was saying,
saying?
would you do all three of them?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's
And,
right.
oh, can I ask you a question, the fishing pier, where's, that's.
Wait
That's
to
the
finish
list.
this one first.
Yeah, that's the last item.
It
Would
was
you
something
do
else, where is that?
7, 8, and 9?
Oh, it's 7, 8,
Okay,
9.
so let's do 7, 8, 9 together. To pursue those, okay. Mary Louise? Yeah.
Amy?
Amy? Okay. Vote.
Fishing pier, so, so we further investigated the possibility of putting something on top of the jetties on either end, and it's not, constructability wise, it's not financially, possible, and it's just too challenging, so it's, getting removed from the possibilities of being added to the park area.
Or you
So
could
that's
build
not
a
even an option.
separate one.
You could build a
We
fishing
could build
pier.
a separate, yes, and that would have its own permitting track that would be, it would not be easy, but you could do it. But the idea of fishing pier was, not suggested at this point to be pursued.
But over the rocks.
Over the rocks,
But
yes.
can a fishing pier go,
It could, we just haven't,
that would
Do we have enough deck space that we could allow some fishing on some of them, if we do any of these additional decks that you're proposing? No?
I don't think so, I think because of the
It has to
distance,
be-
elevation difference, proximity to the water, yeah, I think, bringing this up to the committee maybe last week, was not totally received as being a favorable idea, but
Right.
I'm not gonna speak for them.
I think there's a discussion, we don't even have, we don't go in.
Yeah, we don't need
Just
to,
lay it out.
because if it's not,
It's-
it's
it
also not
doesn't
an option.
impact.
Okay, we don't have an option. Okay.
Would you like the committee to do more work, to come back to you and kind of with some suggestions of how potentially to implement the fishing pier? Or would you like to just remove it as an objective?
I just think it's probably, if it's not economically viable, I just feel like, why pursue it, you know?
Well, I think what Dan is saying is kind of going out over the existing stone breakwaters jetties, that's not really workable, but you can
Right.
theoretically build something.
In
But-
between those two jetties.
Yeah, in all fairness to Tom, who's not here, I would just represent that Tom, as the harbor master, has some concerns around the idea of a separate.
He has deep concerns about it.
Yeah,
I
that's-
honestly would like to table a discussion on the fishing pier tonight. I just don't think we have enough information.
Fair
I
enough.
don't think
Okay.
any of us.
So you're not looking for more information from us?
Not at this moment. I don't
Okay.
think I have the fortitude or.
You have bigger fish to fry.
Forget one. It's temporary.
Thank you very much. This is really, I mean, I know, once again, I know this has been difficult, but it's really helpful, and positions us to kind of go forward to the next level here with it.
Well, we want to thank you, because you
Thank you
guys
so
have
much.
done a tremendous amount of work. It hasn't been, it's been very flawless, as you said. So, thank you for your steady hand.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Do you wanna do the minutes?
I think the committee needs to adjourn their meeting.
Yes. Can I just ask this before we break off? You've heard from the commission, and before we break off, with the committee, any further comments from anybody on the committee at this stage? Okay, thank you all. So with that, I'd make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay, we do still have items on the agenda. I believe we can postpone the meeting for another vote. I'd like to do that.
Postpone the rest of it.
Postpone everything?
Yes.
Is it in the report?
Oh, sorry.
Is it in the report?
Yeah. Well, some of it is.
We can report at the next meeting.
You already made a report.
Good shape.
I think, commission, we haven't gotten through all of our standing reports. The hour is late, and I'm wondering if we should just postpone.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Do you want to at least discuss the minutes?
No, I think we're gonna postpone that till our next meeting, because I know I have a few comments on them, and I just think people are running out of steam.
Yeah.
I do, you guys have to just, are we done? No, we're not done. No, I'm sorry, we're still going. Yes, we're nice to see you. We're wrapping. Yeah, definitely. Decide how we're doing. Okay, so I'm hearing from the group that you would like to postpone discussion of the minutes, that you would, like to forego the updates on the parks improvement projects, until our next meeting, et cetera, et cetera. At this moment, we are still scheduled to meet on August 21st. I think given that we're postponing a number of items, if we can get a quorum, I think we probably should have that meeting. Allow us to do the minutes, get updates on, because there are a number of other projects going on. It would give us an opportunity to debrief and talk about any of these comments. So are there enough people who are available? I know, Susan, you said you're not in town. I'm here.
August 21st.
All right, can I see hands of people who are here on August 21st? 1, 2,
So you would have
3,
four.
4, here? No. 4, 5. So we would have a quorum. We don't know about Lucy.
But yes, or you have a quorum back.
I'll be here too, actually. Oh, so, okay, so I think for now, I think there's so much going on right now, there's just so much, and I think to wait until late September, I think is probably
not well advised, so.
Let's go with that meeting, if people's plans do change, we could look at just calling it as a special meeting if we can find a better date, but I think we probably need to at least keep that date to keep things moving forward. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Susan.